The Microsoft ecosystem is evolving faster than ever. Copilot, Power Platform, security, modern work, Azure AI, new features every week, new opportunities every day. But learning is scattered. Events are expensive, limited, and difficult to access. That changes now. Welcome to M365 Con, the world's largest online Microsoft 365 convention. 2 powerful weeks, 1 week of workshops, 1 week of free global talks and keynotes. Build your own learning path with expert-led workshops. From Power Platform to security, from Copilot to Azure AI, you choose what matters to you. Then join over 60 free sessions with most valuable professionals, Microsoft trainers, architects, and innovators from around the world. Meet the community, explore the virtual expo, connect with experts, and be part of a global Microsoft experience. Accessible, global, interactive, and designed for every Microsoft 365 professional. M365 Con, your community, your learning path, your Microsoft 365 future.
So, hello and a warm welcome back to our M365 Con on the Power BI and Fabric stage, the third part today. And here with me, Monica and John Morehouse, a warm welcome. We present this topic, accelerate your Azure SQL platform for optimal performance and cost. You could start.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate the intro. This is our first session together in the same place. So we're glad to be able to do this for you jointly. It'll be interesting as we share the same stage here online. Thank you for joining Accelerating Your Azure SQL Platform for Optimal Performance and Cost. My name is Monica Morehouse, used to be Monica Rathbun. I am here in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I'm an MVP for Microsoft for a long time now. I think I'm almost on my 10th year, potentially. You can find me online at SQLespresso.com. I am all about performance. And I know we have a small amount of time here, so I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to John.
Hi, I'm John Morehouse. I am also here in Virginia. There's my slide. You can contact me on my contact information there before you. I help Monica run the user group here. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky and all that. I'm also a data platform Microsoft MVP. And I do a lot of things with SQL and a lot of things with Azure stuff.
All right. So I know we don't have a ton of data professionals as far as database professionals here. So our goal is to give you a really high level of what performance is as you start to go to the cloud, considerations you should have before you even embark into the migration of the cloud, decisions you should make, and how that actually turns into dollars as we choose performance features going forward and which platform we are going to use as we move towards the cloud. Always remembering that when you go from an on-premise environment to a cloud environment, performance is completely different. Depending on what you choose, the power you have to fix things and see things and discover what's causing performance issues gets diminished. It's not diminished completely, but depending on the tier that you choose, you may not get all of the information that you're normally able to get to solve your performance issues. And you may not have all of the knobs and DMVs and different options available to you to fix those performance issues, depending on the platform. And it can get very frustrating. So let's embark on that journey here. I'm going to cover some information at the beginning. We'll turn it over to John. He'll cover some, and then I'll pop back in and talk about another option here. So before you even start having the conversation about cloud, you need to be talking not only to management, you need to talk to your infrastructure teams, your networking teams. You need to really know why you're going into the cloud, what you expect to achieve in the cloud, and what it might cost you. If you don't know what your daily workload looks like, unless it's a brand new application, you need to start diving in and seeing how much throughput do you take every day? What does your IO look like? How much data are you pushing in each database environment? What your network infrastructure looks like? What kind of permissions that you have? And not all of this runs into your database realm as far as your DBAs are concerned. But the first questions you need to be having as you go into those boardrooms or those Teams meetings is, what are you trying to solve by going to the cloud? A lot of times it's going to be an HADR situation, which is fantastic. The cloud is great for that. Another situation is going to be cost. Everybody seems to think going to the cloud is going to save you money, because the saving the money goes from a capital expense to a monthly expense. But that monthly expense can creep up on you depending on what options you choose. You need to look and see what your current environment is. You're not necessarily going to pick up the environment that you have now at the same thing. Let's say it's 128 cores with 256 of RAM or 512 of RAM, and you're going to pick that up and do the same thing in the cloud. That's not likely the case. Saving money in the cloud can be easy. It can be something that you can achieve, but likelihood you are going to get that wonderful bill after the first couple months when you've migrated there, because you've chosen higher tiers than you may need, and your dollar figure for cost is going to go through the roof, and they're going to call in consultants or somebody to come and take a look and analyze those costs to figure out what you can do to scale down. That's always going to be the ultimate conversation. So knowing how much data you're going to put out there, what data maybe you can archive off before you go up there, how much data are you retrieving all the time, and what kind of performance metrics are you using to monitor all of that? Does that translate to the cloud? If it doesn't translate to the cloud, it is your job to start looking at what the equivalent is and become a little more educated on what those differences are and where you're getting that information from as you go to the cloud. Because when you're fighting fires, after the fire's already started, that's not a time to start to learn of what you can see and what you can't see. Start to get yourself there ahead of time. Now, there's several offerings when it comes to going out to Azure. For one, or any of the other cloud offerings, whether it's AWS or Google or whatever. Everybody has different types of environments that you can choose. And this is where you start at the very beginning. You need to figure out how much control you want, how much control you plan to give away as far as having Microsoft take it off your plate. A lot of management says, hey, we're going to go to the cloud, so we may not need DBAs. We may not need as many people servicing our environments. And that really depends on which cloud platform you choose, what kind of tier you choose, and what kind of work you actually do. I have yet to see an environment where a DBA is no longer needed. There's been some companies that have tried and has caused major issues, especially when it comes to performance. So make sure you're getting on the right tier. You're going to go infrastructure as service, where you're actually giving yourself what you kind of have on-prem, right? You're going to be managing the infrastructure. You're going to be managing maybe some of the hardware configurations with that, as well as the database. You may go over to a managed instance where you're giving them the ability to help you out with that hardware piece, and you're managing the apps in the database. Or you say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and choose something like Azure SQL Database, which all you're in charge of is the database itself. It really limits your performance that you're able to tune in that. So when you go to these things, which we're going to talk about each one of them, make sure you're making the proper decisions in seeing what each one of these are offering you when it comes to performance and cost. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to John, who's going to start us off with Azure Virtual Machines and kind of get into what offerings you should be considering and what this level gives you when it comes to performance and management as a DBA.
Sweet. Thanks, Monica. I will start talking about some of the hardware, especially with Azure Virtual Machines. You saw the slide before you that Monica was talking about. We'll kind of step through virtual machines, Azure SQL Database, managed instance, and talk about all those three platforms. When we look at Azure and we start to talk about loss of control or how much control you want to relinquish, kind of like what Monica was talking about, Azure Virtual Machines gives you the most comparison as to being on premises. You have the most control, and you can control how much processing power you have, how much memory you have, and how much storage you have. As we move up the tiers to the different platforms, the control in those areas kind of diminish because we give more of those controls to Microsoft. So when we move to an Azure Virtual Machine, we really need to understand what our workloads look like. If you're dealing with Power BI or Fabric, We are all very much aware as to the volume of data, but we really need to look at how much processing power we need, how much memory we need, and how much storage capacity we need in order to service those Fabric type workloads, whether it's moving from a virtual machine into Fabric, maybe you're bringing data down to SSIS or reporting services or something on premises, running Power BI. We need to understand what those options are. With Azure, we have a number of different VM sizes. So if you've never seen an Azure virtual machine, you can configure it based off the type of workload that you're running. What you see on the screen before you is just a representation as to the different kinds of virtual machines that Microsoft offers within the Azure platform. So for an example, like a SQL Server database, I most likely want a memory optimized type of machine. I want high memory to CPU ratio, which SQL Server loves memory. The more memory you can give it, the better it runs. Everything happens in memory. So I typically will create a memory optimized virtual machine if I'm going to run SQL Server, because I know that is great for that particular virtual machine size is great for my SQL Server workloads. There are multiple kinds. There's general purpose, compute optimized, storage optimized if you need high disk throughput and I/O. If you need something that needs a GPU, graphics rendering, video editing, that type of stuff, you can spin those types of virtual machines up. One of the big ways that we can help save costs on virtual machines is really looking at the number of disks and the type of disks we have underneath the virtual machine itself. This kind of goes back to storage. And the storage that the virtual machines use is a virtualized disks. I know when I first got into working with Azure in the cloud, it took me a little bit to get my mind wrapped around this because I was used to dealing with physical disks in a data center, something I could go into a room and actually touch, the disks and pull them out of the arrays and see what happens. The physical disks still exist within the Azure data centers, but Microsoft has virtualized those disks. So when we see them within virtual machines, we still see the good old-fashioned C drive, D drive, E drive, whatever we want to name them, but they're actually virtual disks that's being presented from the data center itself. Now, the disks themselves offer block level storage volumes, but they also offer different performance characteristics depending on which kind of disk that we choose. And one of the things that we can do with these virtualized disks is that we can actually stripe them together, and we can actually double or triple or quadruple the number of IOPS and throughput we get with that particular storage. So if you've never done any type of disk striping, essentially if we combine two disks together and they both have, let's say, 5,000 IOPS, if we took two disks at 5,000 IOPS, we'd get 10,000 IOPS because we've striped them together. That's one way that we can optimize performance is by striping those storage disks together. Now, Microsoft offers a number of different kinds of storage, depending on what your needs are. You can see on the screen before you, here are some characteristics of the storage types that Microsoft offers. On the far right, we have your good old-fashioned standard hard drive. We call those spinning disks. If you've been involved in the IT world for a while, way back when, storage used to be magnetic with a actual physical platter that spun around. And there was a head that would read the different sectors on that platter. And that's essentially what the standard hard drive is. They're slow. They're great for archival storage, something that you don't need really big performance out of. And they also are the least cost effective, or at least expensive. But you can see the performance, the maximum throughput is only 500 megs a second. We only get anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 IOPS. So I wouldn't use this particular storage for a Microsoft SQL Server, especially in a production environment, because it's not going to perform for what I need. Now, if we go all the way to the left, we see Ultra disks. Ultra disk is a solid state disk, but you can see the capacity and the performance is significantly better than my standard hard drive. I get maximum of 10,000 megabytes per second, or 10 gigs per second, and a maximum of 4,000 IOPS. That is smoking fast. The trick, though, is that as we move left, my left, maybe you're right, the costs increase. So ultra disks are really, really expensive. In my experience, I don't see a lot of usage of ultra disks within the environment. Typically we see premium SSD or premium SSD V2s. Premium SSD is the old school premium SSDs that we used to use within the past year or so. Microsoft, a little bit, maybe a year and a half, Microsoft released the V2 of those. I typically recommend clients use those premium SSDs V2 because they offer significant improvement on performance. You can see the throughput and the IOPS are higher. We actually have more granular control with that type of storage in terms of a slider that we can actually granularly add more throughput or IOPS. And they're actually a little bit cheaper than premium SSDs. So if you're looking to go to Azure with virtual machines, I highly recommend that you look at the premium SSD V2s. They'll give you great performance, a little bit better flexibility, especially from a cost perspective. You can kind of fine tune that storage to make sure it fits within your budgets. Here's some characteristics. As you can see, this is the premium SSDs. You can see that they are labeled P123. I have no idea why they use that nomenclature. But you can see that, like, say, a P30, which is a 1 terabyte disk, we get 5,000 IOPS, and we get a maximum of 200 megabytes per second of throughput. Typically, if I'm going to do a Microsoft SQL Server virtual machine, that's typically what I would use is a 1 terabyte drive. And if I needed multiple terabytes of storage, I would assign multiple P30s and then stripe them together to, again, get higher IOPS and throughput at the same cost. But just be aware that if you're going to create a virtual machine in Azure, you need to be cognizant of the underlying storage and the performance characteristics that we have of that to make sure that they fit your workloads specifically. Microsoft does offer a really nice flowchart online. You can go out there and look for this flowchart on microsoftlearn.com. And it kind of walks you through, depending on like how many peak IOPS you have. So you have to, again, this goes back to knowing your workload. You have to understand your workload in order to pick the right thing. Otherwise, you might get that surprise bill in Azure. Those surprise bills suck. But you can use this flowchart to determine what kind of storage you need for your virtual machine. And again, in order to get your most cost-effective storage that works for your particular needs. So that is Azure Virtual Machines. And I think we're going to talk about Azure SQL Database. If my slide was actually... Yes, we're going to walk in now into Azure SQL Database. I think we're about on time. This is Platform as a Service. When we talk about Platform as a Service, this goes back again to what Monica mentioned earlier about the amount of control that you have. With virtual machines, we see everything from the operating system up. So we can control Windows, we can control a SQL Server instance, we can control anything that we install in that virtual machine. With Azure SQL Database, because it's a Platform as a Service offering, we give some of that control back to Microsoft. We actually can't see the operating system that is running our SQL databases. There are multiple tiers of Azure SQL Database, and they're all related to kind of performance and costs. So you have to understand between the tiers what you're paying for, because again, you're giving some of that control to Microsoft. Some of that's great, like they do automatic backups. They have baked in high availability, so you don't have to configure anything. Platform as a Service, Azure SQL Database is actually one of my favorite products from Microsoft. I highly recommend it for any new SQL database development work that you might be doing. But there's different tiers, and the first one we're going to talk about is general purpose. General purpose is kind of that sweet spot middle ground between really, really slow performance and costs to ultra fast, and I got to pay a lot of money for tiers. So a lot of my clients are running general purpose. What you see before you is the architecture behind the scenes. We actually have 3 nodes that run a copy of your database behind the scenes. So that's one of the ways that Microsoft provides high availability, is that you've actually got 3 different copies of your database readily available in case one node goes down. The trick, though, is that your database files, your MDF and your LDF, are actually stored on Azure Premium Storage. So they're actually attached through the network. So your latency to those files is slightly increased. If we think about the physical nature of SQL Server, the closer that we can get our database files to our processing power, the faster that it'll be, right? Now, when I say the latency, we're talking milliseconds between the compute power and where the database files are actually stored, but there is a latency there that you have to be aware of. So the difference is that just keep in mind that your MDF and LDF are stored on a remote network location, kind of away from your compute. There's actually a stateful layer, a stateless compute layer, and a stateful data layer that kind of communicates between the two. But there's a little latency between that remote storage that you have to be aware of. That's general purpose. Now, if we move up to the very shiny business critical, with business critical, the architecture changes a little bit. You'll notice that they don't store your database files on a remote storage anymore. They actually store it on a locally attached solid state disk right there on your compute. Obviously, if I put my data and log files for SQL Server on a drive that is locally attached to my compute, my latency is significantly cheaper. And with business critical, we actually get 4 copies, but you have to pay for it. Business critical can cost you quite a bit of money. I've seen clients that say, oh, we need business critical because we need super fast IO. Not really. If they don't understand their workloads appropriately, they can actually maybe get away with general purpose and save quite a bit of money by staying in that general purpose tier and really not needing that business critical. But understanding the architecture underneath both tiers, you can kind of make a cost performance judgment and choose the right one that works best for you. We also have hyperscale. Hyperscale is another tier in Azure SQL Database. It is a great tier. It's actually slightly cheaper than general purpose. I think they just made relatively recently, you don't pay for SQL Server licensing in hyperscale anymore. And so it makes it a great option to start and stay in from a performance perspective. They completely re-architected the architecture behind the scenes. We actually now have page servers and a log service, which provides high availability and scalability really, really easily. One of the tricks, though, with hyperscale is that you can't move out of it. One of the things I love about Azure SQL Database is that I can move frequently between, say, general purpose and business critical. I can float between those two all day long. I can scale up really easily or scale down within those tiers. With hyperscale, once I'm there, because the architecture changed behind the scenes, I'm stuck there. If you move there from general purpose or business critical, you have 30 days to move back out. But once you exceed those 30 days, you are in hyperscale from that point forward. So if you're looking to go to Azure SQL Database, it would be great to look at hyperscale. Just know that it's a little bit cheaper than general purpose, but you're going to be stuck there. So just make sure that you do your due diligence, make sure you test, know your workloads, and then you can look at the pricing tables to make sure that it's the right fit for you. And back to Monica.
So before I get started with serverless, I just want to touch base and have some of you know that's listening right now. I realized very early on as we started to go into Azure that half the stuff John and Denny are going to talk about is going to go way over my head. And I used to never care about. I used to not care about networking. I did not care about storage. I did not care about, well, I cared, but I did not dive into the real meat of IOPS and throughput and latency and knowing which disk types we needed. As you start going to the cloud, unfortunately, all of you solid DBAs out there, we need to start learning that infrastructure piece and knowing what things John is talking about, right? As we're picking these tiers and trying to figure out where our data workload best fits and for the cost and budget that we have, we need to start diving into what these tiers are and what everything John just told us truly means to our workload. So start having those conversations, start looking at Microsoft Learn, take a look at the infrastructure pieces of each of the offerings in Azure. Start looking back at this video. I'm hoping it's able to be restreamed for everybody to go back and learn a little bit about what John's talking about when he starts talking about the different disk tiers and the different IOPS and the different availabilities and controls that you have as you're choosing each one of these. Because cost matters. And these decisions are going to play a huge part in the performance of your workload. There's workload throttling that goes with it. And it all has to do with the IOPS that John was talking about, and the latency and the throughput and the bandwidth that is given to you based on the tier that is being chosen. So for all of those that just listened to John and it went over your head or your eyes glassed over like mine used to do, and I swear it used to do, as soon as they started talking about those things, I'm like, I don't care about it. Somebody used to handle that for me. Now it's my job to know all of that, especially when it comes to performance, because that's where you're going to find a lot of your bottlenecks. So now that I've said that, and hopefully, some of you feel better about maybe not getting all the information from John and understanding why that mattered for you, let's talk a little bit about serverless. When we come to talk about different offerings, there are some ways to actually save money, or actually by chance spend more money than you expected to, by using an option called serverless. You truly do still get a server as part of your database infrastructure here, but you get the option to start to pause that compute when you don't need it. Why do we want to pay for something in the cloud when we don't need it? So they've given this option to us called serverless. And what that allows us to do is when our workload is not active, we can actually put in something called auto pausing that will allow the compute to stop billing us. And stopping billing us means money back in our pocket. Now, the gotcha for this is a few things. One, it's going to cost you more for compute because it is a different level, different tier of option available for you. And they know that you're going to pause it, right? So you're still going to be charged for compute. I mean, you're only going to be charged for compute as you're using it, but you still get charged for storage because your storage will always exist, right? But they give you an option to pause some of that billing. You can actually set this up in the portal and have it auto pause for you. When my workload stops at night, potentially, I have clients that work from 8 to 5 p.m. and then their workload drops. Maybe they have a couple jobs that run at night, or nobody logs in after 5 p.m. I can actually pause my compute and not be billed for it during the time. I can set this to say, hey, if my workload has gone to sleep and I'm not doing anything, nobody's connecting to the database, nothing's happening, stop billing me after an hour. Or now they have it set to a possible 15-minute interval. If my workload's not going anywhere, nobody's connecting, let's not bill me. That's where you can actually use this serverless option that allows you to save some of the money on compute. It used to be an hour. It's still defaulted by an hour, but I can get it down granular to about 15 minutes. Once that 15 minutes comes up, it stops my compute. I'm saving money. Now, there's a couple of gotchas for that. If you have anything connected to the server, you have jobs running, you have somebody that leaves an open connection, you have some kind of activity that happens, maybe database monitoring that's going on. Anytime it goes and does anything, it's going to be live and active. So you may not get that pause that you're looking for. So be sure you know your workload and what's active at all times to figure out if serverless can save you some money. There's a couple gotchas with it, and this is where I get grumpy. When you actually bring down a server, stop my compute and stop billing me, it pulls down that instance of SQL Server and it says nobody's going to use it. I'm going to kind of turn it off, well, and put it to sleep so I don't get charged for it, right? Obviously. But sometimes when you get a new connection to it, it's got to wake up. So when it wakes up and becomes live again, it can take some time. It used to take a lot more time before, but they've gotten a little bit better with that. So make sure when you look into this option, you are looking for those delay times in waking up. Maybe you need to set a job that wakes up the instance if everybody starts at 8 a.m. Maybe you need to wake it up at 7:50 and make sure that the instance is running and all the connections are able to connect and all of that good stuff with a job or what have you that you're using Azure function or whatever you do to wake it up ahead of time. Because sometimes you'll get the call from the users and saying, hey, I have to keep hitting F5, I can't get a connection to the database, and here it's still trying to wake up. So keep that in mind. It is kind of slow. It can be frustrating, but if you know about it, you can mitigate it really easily. Same thing was when it sleeps, it's kind of turning it off, right? It's kind of turning off your instance, putting it aside so you're not using any compute. You're saving Microsoft resources, you're saving yourself money, all of this great stuff. But when you turn something off, just like with SQL Server, and you restart an instance, or you do anything like that with restarting the servers or the SQL Server instance itself, you lose all the good stuff that helps performance tuning do its best, right? It gives you all the data that you need to do your performance tunings. Things that are not solid for you is going to be things like statistics, some of the dynamic management views, weight stats, your execution plans, things that you had in cache go away as this gets turned off and becomes auto paused. So if you're needing any of that information, such as index usage statistics and all of that great stuff, and you have good execution plans in there, all of that stuff from cache is going to go away as it turns it down. So you will have to refresh that as it comes back up. And that could be a performance hit. So that's definitely something you need to be looking at as you're looking into this option. Yes, we can save money. Yes, serverless can be cheaper for you because you only use it as needed and you're just paying for storage. It can be a really great option for those workloads that are really good at being stable, right? You know exactly it's going to be 8 to 5 p.m. That's when we use it. We don't do anything else. I'm going to save us some money for those other hours. Definitely something to look at, but there are considerations. Let me turn this back over to John. He can go and talk more about Azure Managed Instance. And remember, if you're not really into the infrastructure side, pay attention. This stuff's important, and you need to become more familiar with some of the topics that he's going to talk about.
Yay! More platform as a service stuff. So Azure SQL Managed Instance is also one of those platform tiers that I really like. I think it's got a good fit for generic workloads. And just like Azure SQL Database, we relinquish some of the control and performance options back to Microsoft because they manage it. Just like Azure SQL Database, they manage databases, they manage high availability, they manage the infrastructure underneath the SQL Server instance. With Azure SQL Managed Instance, we get to see more of that managed instance. So we get things like database mail and SQL Server agent and some other components of SQL Server that we don't get with Azure SQL Database. I like to think of this as that middle tier between Azure virtual machines and Azure SQL Database. Managed instance kind of fits in the middle between those two. Just like with Azure SQL Database, there are different tiers, and each tier gets you different levels of performance and costs. So there's a general purpose tier, just like there is in Azure SQL Database, and it's configured pretty much the same. We actually get 3 copies behind the scenes, and it's remote network attached storage. So your MDF and your LDF files for your databases actually live in network storage. So again, there's that latency there between the compute power of SQL Server and the network storage. It's minimal. We're talking probably 30, 40 milliseconds between the two, if I had to guess. So typically it can cause problems. There is a stateless compute layer and a stateful data layer, just like there is in Azure SQL Database. In a sense, the general purpose kind of functions as a FCI. If you've ever dealt with a failover cluster instance, behind the scenes, the architecture is more like an FCI here. But it's just know that it's networkly attached storage. There is a gotcha with general purpose in the storage, and I'll talk about that then in a second. And I'll show you how to get out of that. If we talk about business critical is more like an availability group behind the scenes. So if you've ever dealt with availability groups within SQL Server, that architecture is functions like that. But we do get 4 copies. But you also notice here that the data files in the TempDB are all stored on locally attached SSDs. So very similar to Azure SQL Database Business Critical, we get our data file and log files super closely attached to our compute power. And so our latency is very, very minimal. But if you want to pay for it, Business Critical will be more expensive than general purpose. But the IO and the performance and the IOPS are going to be significantly better in Business Critical than it will be in general purpose. One of the gotchas with general purpose is the disks are determined based off the size of your database. And this has been a complaint of a lot of customers from about managed instance is that if I have a small database and I go to managed instance, general purpose, the performance characteristics that I'm going to get for that database is based off the size of the database. So we talked about storage from the virtual machine perspective previously. So for example, if I have a 25 gig database and I want to go to general purpose managed instance, with that 25 gig database, I'm going to get a 32 gig drive that supports it. You'll notice that the IOPS and throughput for that size of disk is horrible. If I have a production workload with a 25 gig database, that particular performance characteristics is going to suck pretty much. Now, the way that you can get around that with general purpose is to increase the size of the database to say 1 terabyte. Because if I expand the size of the database and I get it to 1 terabyte, I'm going to move that to a 1 terabyte disk, and I'm going to get the 5,000 IOPS and the 200 megs a second. That kind of sucks, to be honest. That process of increasing the size of the database can take time, and that's not really something you want to do in a performance or a production environment. So if you're going to go to general purpose, just know that that gotcha kind of exists. You'll pay for that bigger storage, but you'll get better performance characteristics. Now, one of the things that you can do, and I highly recommend this, last November, Microsoft generally announced next-gen hardware for managed instance. They actually redid the architecture underneath the scenes. We no longer use network attached storage per se. They actually have a ESAN or elastic SAN storage now that they use to facilitate this. So we still get the benefit of the Azure SQL Managed Instance general purpose tier, so we get a better cost perspective, but we get super improved latency and IOPS and throughput using the next-gen hardware. If you're going to go to Azure SQL Managed Instance, I highly recommend that you look at this next-gen level. I actually have experience moving a client to general purpose. The performance they had on that tier was horrible. We moved them to next gen. It was an hour to scale them to that tier, and they saw significant storage improvement across the board from a latency and IOPS and throughput perspective. It actually got them out of a fire. We moved them to the next gen tier, and we saw immediate improvement across the board. And it was great, better. And we get better control on IOPS and memory. There are 3 different tiers within the next gen platform. We can actually add more IOPS. So if I need to fine tune the number of IOPS my workload needs, there is a cost to that. But I was able to add like another 1,000 IOPS for my client's workload. And I think it cost like $38 a month for another 1,000 IOPS. For that price, I think that's a great win. There is a memory optimized, I think, tier, and I can actually add more memory. So if I need to, again, fine tune my workloads, there is a base amount of memory you get with a tier. If you want to add, say, another X number of gigabytes of memory, you pay for that extra. So there is a formula out there. I've got blog posts on it and whatnot, but you can go out to the pricing table to figure out what that's going to cost you. But the next gen hardware for managed instance is a great solution. I highly recommend that solution from a cost perspective, performance perspective. It's going to be a great solution for you. So next is SQL and Fabric. Ooh, the new stuff.
Yeah.
The new stuff. So this is the new hot stuff that everybody's been talking about, right? SQL and Fabric. Really behind the scenes, SQL and Fabric is really all about control. The Azure or SQL database in Fabric, it's really general purpose. And as Monica kind of talked about serverless, it is actually on that serverless tier. One of the things that they did differently with that tier is it will pause aggressively. In order to try to save you money, it is going to try to pause at any given moment. So just know that it's actually Azure SQL Database behind the scenes. If you go to an Azure SQL Database in Fabric, we do have less control. That top line there, it's actually a software as a service versus platform as a service. So think about our tiers in terms of infrastructure as a service is the virtual machine. Platform as a service is we lose a little bit of control back to Microsoft. And software as a service is at the very top where we have very minimal control on the architecture under the scenes. All we can see from that perspective is the database itself, and we can only see certain aspects of that. We can't see certain things about the database. We can only see things within the database, not about the OS or the virtual machine or the hardware that's actually running it. But it is Azure SQL Database behind the scenes. It is worth noting that they changed, in a sense, they changed the way that they price out SQL and Fabric. We now have capacity units. In my mind, it's kind of like Farkles. There is a formula behind the scenes that kind of maps this all out. But you have capacity units that the database consumes. We know that there's about one capacity unit is 0.38 vCores. I always function like a vCore type of mentality. So if you have an F64 capacity, that's roughly 24 vCores. One of the things that we do recommend from a SQL and Fabric perspective is that make sure that you architect your capacity units and your capacity appropriately. Don't put everything on one capacity because you will consume that capacity without knowing it. And as soon as you consume it, everything stops. You'll get throttled because Microsoft says, hey, you've gone over your capacity. We need to stop maybe your production SQL and Fabric database. And that's not going to be fun. So if you are in SQL and Fabric or you're going to go to SQL and Fabric, make sure that you understand how capacity is architected and laid out. We really recommend put your databases on one capacity, your monitoring on another capacity, your development on another capacity, and then manage those capacities independently, so that way you don't get into throttling and or lose performance. Now, capacities can get costly. You can see there all the way down at the bottom, the F2048, which is roughly 784 cores, is roughly $270,000 United States per month. I do not know of anybody running that capacity. Do you? No, I don't either. Most of my clients are running F64s or 128s, depending on what they need. The F64 seems to be very much popular. But just know and understand that if you accidentally spin up an F2048, bring your checkbook, your credit card, something, because it's going to cost you quite a bit. So that was capacity, and Fabric does really high level. Some additional things that you can do in Azure, and then we'll kind of get wrapped up. You can do dev test subscriptions. This is one thing that I think that a lot of companies miss, is that if you have Visual Studio developers, a pro license, I think, or higher, you can actually spin up dev test subscriptions and you save money on licensing. So like Azure SQL Database, you don't pay for the SQL license, you just pay for the compute. Reservations and savings plans. This is another thing that I see clients really miss. Reservations means that you are committed to consuming X number of vCores for say a virtual machine in a specific region, and then Microsoft gives you a discount on the compute price. Reservations, you can save 70% of the cost of that compute. Savings plans, you can save anywhere from 30 to 40% probably. Everybody's going to be different, right? Your mileage may vary, but reservations and savings plans is a fantastic way to help save money in Azure while still maintaining that performance. Azure hybrid licensing. If you have SQL Server licensing for your on-premise environment, those licenses should translate into licenses for Azure SQL resources. So make sure that you look at whatever licensing that your organization may have purchased. You might have that hybrid licensing to help save on licensing costs of SQL Server in the cloud. DR replica licensing. Microsoft made a great change 2019, I think. Since SQL Server 2019, that if you don't hold me to that, go do your research. But if you have a DR copy of your database in Azure, you could potentially get that secondary license free based off Microsoft licensing. Definitely double check with your licensing provider. But if you have, say, a failover group with Azure SQL Database, or you're using Azure Virtual Machine as a DR replica, you can pay for the compute, but your SQL license for that secondary could be free, depending on what you're using it for. And the other thing, pause your Fabric capacity. One of the beautiful things about Fabric capacity is that we can actually pause it because it's serverless. We can actually pause that capacity, which will pause all the activity within that capacity, and we don't lose money based off of it. which is a great thing because nobody wants that surprise bill. So if you are using SQL in Fabric, you can pause the actual capacity itself and pretty much everything will stop. You want to follow up?
Yeah, can you undo those?
Oh, yeah.
So if we have a few more minutes, I'm hoping. If not, stop us if we have questions out there outstanding. There's one piece that John kind of touched on really briefly. He said a few words about it. And if we have a few minutes, I want to take advantage of this and talk. John's currently unhiding these slides for me and talk about these, because this is what bit me in the butt many, many times with clients, because they didn't realize, based on the tier that you pick. And feel free, again, those in the behind the stage here, to stop me if we start running out of time here. But based on the tier that you pick, you need to pay attention to what the throttling is. John mentioned throttling, and that actually really plays a part in your workload. You could have a lot of times where things are running great in the morning, and then all of a sudden in the afternoon, everything goes to crap. And it could be that you've actually been throttled. You can be throttled based on how many API calls you have. There's limits on how much storage you have. There's limits on the compute that you have available. And some of this is based on region. So depending on where you put your workload, regions can actually have throttling to allow Microsoft to share all these environments with everybody, right? They have to have a way to keep everybody working nicely together and set some limits for each one of these tiers. So pay attention what those limits are. Some environments have burstable limits, and once you hit that burst, you start dropping down in the amount of throughput and availability you have to move that data at scale for faster performance. All of a sudden, you start to get a slowdown. So how do you mitigate this? You start with a performance tuning. You always tune your workload before you go to the cloud and after you go to the cloud. Make sure that you are getting the less amount of IO and reads possible, paying attention to query store and looking at your heavy volume reads and getting down those logical reads can help you from hitting those throttling things. You can scale up to make sure your workload can be handled in the end of the day and whatever big giant runs that have to run, reports and all of this, but that's money. So knowing what the big giant scale up requirements might be for you is very important for you. Ask for a limit increase. If it's a region issue, you can go to Microsoft and say, hey, we really need this resource. Can you please make an exception? And sometimes they will. I can't tell you that's going to be a definite, but it is possible. Start implementing things that are going to monitor things like API calls. Start working with your devs to find out why are they calling all the time with a brand new API call. Can they call once and leave it open? Can they, what are they doing to handle those APIs? This is another thing that you need to start to get into as a DBA to handle that workload going to the cloud. So I know John mentioned it briefly. I wanted to touch base and really, really, really get in your mind that things get throttled and you have no control over that throttling, but you need to know when it's happening. And you can find this kind of information when you're looking at performance metrics in almost any of the cloud environments in their portals. So I am done. I just wanted to touch base with that and get us back on track. I took a few more minutes, but I think it's really important to talk about that throttling. So I wanted to have him go ahead and unhide those slides. Gentlemen, I think we are pretty good at wrapping up. I think we hit our target time. Does anybody have any questions out there that we'd like to talk about?
Private chat.
So I have a question. So, I said I'm a German guy, and for the German people, the most important things are the costs. And what cost pitfalls do teams most often encounter after migrating to Azure SQL?
So much. So what happens when they get to the cloud, many people sit in a room and say, hey, we currently have 64 cores and 512 mega RAM, and it runs 35 to 175 databases all at once. This is what we need. Let's go ahead and pick that tier and make sure we have what we need, right? So you get it all moved, you migrate it, it looks wonderful. You know that first month cost is going to be high because you migrated it. And then the second month cost, okay, we still had some residual changes. That third month cost comes in, and then all of a sudden everybody's saying, we got to scale down. This is too much. This is too much. So for me, it's finding out that they took their workload from on-prem and thought they needed to mirror it straight into the same type of environment in the cloud, which is just not true. Right. So that's when they get the big giant bills and they're asked to scale down. And then all of a sudden, performance tanks potentially, right? Because we end up with different tiers we have to go on. What about you, John?
Yeah, I agree with what Monica said. And one of the things that we can do to help prevent that is, and I think Microsoft does a great job of doing this, is that you can actually see your cost analysis in Azure. So if you look in your Azure portal, there's actually a cost analysis blade, and it'll break out the cost of all your stuff based off the type of resource, the region, which subscription it's in, all of that. And we can actually set up budgets for those resources. So that's one of the biggest pitfalls that I see is they do exactly what Monica said. They go to the cloud and they kind of leave it, and then a huge monstrous bill shows up because they weren't doing the follow-up thing of actually monitoring their costs to see where they're at. So when I go to my clients, I actually help them set up budgets, just like a personal budget. Hey, I want to spend $1,000 a month. If I hit that $1,000 monthly budget by day 2, I've got a problem. And so I can set up alerts within that budget to notify me to go, so I don't get that big, $10,000, $20,000 surprise bill at the end of the day, and then go adjust things, kind of like what Monica said.
Now, one thing I want to add, if we've got a second, is we get into the fact that the cloud is so versatile. I can scale up and scale down in milliseconds sometimes, and my users may not see it, right? So we get a lot of management that says, oh, we'll just scale up, and then at the end of the day, we'll scale down, or we'll scale up to cover this part of the month, and we'll scale down. Yeah, that saves a little bit of money between the scale up and scale down, but you get into this thing of you scale up, scale down, scale up, scale down, scale up, scale down, and every time you do that, there's performance impacts.
That's true.
There are issues with managing all of that. Try not to get yourself into these scale up, scale down scenarios. Yes, it's needed sometimes, but that's not a cost saving performance thing that you should be doing on a regular basis, right? There are some things for it, and it's a luxury.
Yeah.
But don't get into the realm of scale up, scale down, and think you're going to save a bunch of money, right? Save a bunch of money as you go. So,
thank you. Very good insights. So, I want to thank you. It was, I think, a great session, and I think this was the first session with 2 hosts. Very, very good. So I want to thank you. I wish you a nice day, and I hope you see us again.
Yes, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
And our next session is Markus Ehrenmüller Jensen with Dex Demystified, 5 keys every beginner needs to learn early. We see us back again in 8 minutes. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Stay ahead in tech with the latest Microsoft insights and updates tailored for IT pros and C-level executives daily on M365.fm. Your daily dose of comprehensive Microsoft expertise, news, detailed analysis, expert opinions, and insightful commentary on Azure, Microsoft 365, and more related technologies daily. Dive into in-depth discussions on security, productivity, and cloud computing, straight from the tech trenches, where experts share insights, best practices, and real-world experiences daily. Get the inside scoop on Microsoft's latest releases and how they can transform your business operations. Expert interviews, tech breakdowns, and strategic insights, all in one concise, engaging, and highly informative podcast series that delivers valuable knowledge. M365.fm is your go-to source for making informed tech decisions that drive business success through expert analysis, insightful guidance, and reliable technology recommendations daily always. Every episode is packed with highly actionable advice, the latest Microsoft news updates, and expert insights that help you stay ahead of the technology curve and make informed decisions. From cybersecurity threats to comprehensive cloud migration strategies and innovative security solutions, we've got you completely covered with expertise and proven methodologies always. Join a community of tech leaders and innovators who rely on M365.fm for their Microsoft insights. Supercharge your knowledge on Microsoft tech and stay competitive in the fast-paced IT landscape by staying updated with the latest technology trends and innovations daily. Subscribe now and get ready to elevate your tech game with the latest from M365.fm. Your next tech breakthrough is just an episode away. Tune in daily to explore new dimensions, witness futuristic innovations, and get inspired by the technologies transforming our world completely every day now. Expand your Microsoft expertise with in-depth analysis and expert commentary through detailed guides, webinars, and insightful interviews with industry thought leaders and experts daily now. Don't miss out on the latest trends and updates in the Microsoft ecosystem regularly through their official channels, and stay informed about their newest releases and behind-the-scenes developments slowly. Be the first to know about new Microsoft features and how to leverage them effectively for your business growth and operational excellence immediately every day. Your daily podcast for staying on top of Microsoft tech. No confusing jargon, just straight insights and expert analysis every single day, keeping you ahead. Make M365.fm your daily habit for staying ahead in the rapidly evolving world of Microsoft technologies and beyond. Discovering new possibilities daily with expert insights and analysis. Start listening now at M365.fm and take complete control of your Microsoft journey today with expert insights and comprehensive resources available instantly to guide you through every step.
Welcome to Power Bros Knowledge, where Power Platform meets pure innovation. Your business runs on chaos, approvals lost, data scattered, time wasted. We know that pain. Now imagine automating everything, faster, smarter, and built for impact. That's where Power Bros come in, architects of digital change. We don't talk trends, we build results. Our Knowledge Hub turns expertise into action. Real tutorials, real automation, real impact. Whether it's Power Apps, Automate, Logic Apps, or Entra, we make it work together, smarter. Join the Power Bros movement. 30,000 professionals learning, building, and sharing every day. Ready to transform your workflows? Book us now, and let's build something legendary together. The Microsoft ecosystem is evolving faster than ever. Copilot, Power Platform, security, modern work, Azure AI, new features every week, new opportunities every day. But learning is scattered. Events are expensive, limited, and difficult to access. That changes now. Welcome to M365 Con, the world's largest online Microsoft 365 convention. 2 powerful weeks. 1 week of workshops, 1 week of free global talks and keynotes. Build your own learning path with expert-led workshops. From Power Platform to security, from Copilot to Azure AI, you choose what matters to you. Then join over 60 free sessions with most valuable professionals, Microsoft trainers, architects, and innovators from around the world. Meet the community, explore the virtual expo, connect with experts, and be part of a global Microsoft experience. Accessible, global, interactive, and designed for every Microsoft 365 professional. M365 Con, your community, your learning path, your Microsoft 365 future.
Hello and a warm welcome to the M365 Con again. Now here with me, Markus Ehremüller-Jensen. Warm welcome to you. And our topic today is DAX Demystified, 5 key lessons every beginner needs to learn early. The stage is up to you.
Thank you very much. Then I will share my screen. Where's the share screen button in here? Share screen. And I will share that into a screen. That's the easiest. And I should be able to see my whole screen. So everything is mirrored. And now you see my slide deck, hopefully. Yeah, welcome to DAX Demystified. My name is Markus Ehremüller-Jensen. I'm based in Austria. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next 45 minutes I have to explain you the most important stuff about DAX when you start your DAX journey. So the most important knowledge is things, also for this talk, I gathered the things I would have loved to know that somebody would have explained me before I started to learn DAX, right? There's 5 things. And one is there's calculated columns and they behave like Excel formulas. So that's very easy to entry to the world of DAX by using and writing calculated columns. Measures are filtered. We will see what that means during the next 40 minutes. Measures can also behave like Excel formulas, so they can behave like what we see in the first demo when we talk about calculated columns. DAX can control filters. This sounds a little bit counterintuitive because if you know how reports work, it means that somebody has a slicer, filter, whatever, you filter something as a use of the report and then filter stuff. But as a text author, you can also filter things and avoid that things are being displayed. And the last thing is that I sum up everything, right? The most, or some of the things that might be confusing. What's the difference between calculated columns and measures? And the earlier you accept that they're completely different things, two different things, the easier your learning path will be. The only sure DAX as a language, this is common, right? But how they evaluate it, how they work is two completely different things. Let's start with what I mean with calculated columns behave like Excel formulas. So what is DAX? DAX is data analysis expressions. In the early days, it was also called data analytic expressions. So it's not the Deutsche Aktienindex in case you're looking for stock shares or whatever. We're talking about data analysis expressions, and it lives and was born with the Power BI world, right? The first version of Power BI was not Power BI Desktop, but there was something called Power Pivot add-in for Excel, which was available to download and install for Excel 2010. It's a couple of years ago, right? And then with Excel 2013, it was part of the product. And then in 2015, the team decided, oh, this is too slow, right? The releases Excel and Office makes then was too slow. They wanted to come up with their own product, which is Power BI Desktop, which has releases every single month, except for December of the years. And the same also applies to analysis services Tabular, in case you're using analysis services. So one of the SQL Server tools and services available in SQL Server, or Azure analysis services. This is also analysis services Tabular. There, DAX lives to write queries and measures and calculated columns and write expressions. As at the point in time when DAX was born, there were already other tools available. Of course, they took concepts over which, like having a best of breed, right? Looking at Excel, for example, as it was born with Excel, it was very logical that the syntax for DAX is function-based as it is in Excel. We'll see like the if function looks very, very similar to what you do in Excel. I believe that somebody did not lie to me when they told me that over 100 functions do share the same source code. That's except the same thing. So if you know what a sum or an if statement in a function in Excel is, you already know how this works in DAX. From SQL, the structure query language, they took over the concept of relational functions. So in SQL, we have to join things. We can union or so use set operators on queries and query results. This is also available in DAX. And in SQL, it's not called a row context, but this is what is it in SQL. In SQL, if you write a select statement and then put like select and first name, comma, last name, comma, first name concatenated to last name, then you get 3 columns. And these expressions are evaluated for every column, for every row of your return result set, right? For every table, for every row in the table, it's evaluated and then put it out, right, in the result set. And this is what we call a row context in DAX. Nobody calls it a row context SQL because there's now other contexts. That's the only way how things work. In MDX, which is the query and measure language for multidimensional databases, so analysis services, multidimensional, not tabular. There we have measures where you can store a formula which aggregates things or works with aggregated values as a formula, which is not persisted, where the result is not persisted in the database, but just a formula exists. And this is also available in DAX. We can have DAX measures in Power BI. And in MDX, we also have implicit joins. So you define how the tables are connected to each other, not in the query, the select statement or evaluate statement in DAX, but you put it like as a metadata as part of the database. That's what you do in the model view in Power BI. You connect tables over building a filter relationship, right? It's not really a foreign key constraint, but it's a filter relationship, right? And then we have filter context is also available in the name. So we have the same formula like sales, sum of sales amount, but the sum of sales amount will result in a different number depending on the filter context, right? If I put a table and have like product bikes in one of the rows, then and it's another row I see the components, then the numbers are probably different because one is the sales amount of the bikes, the other one is the sales amount of the components. But the formula, the DAX formula, the MDX formula for the measure is the very same, but the evaluation context where it's evaluated is different, right? And what we also have in DAX is because we have a row context and a filter context, things or calculations can transition between the formula context, the row context and the filter context. This is new because in SQL we only have row context, in MDX we only have filter context. The language itself is used for measures, for calculated columns, for calculated tables, row level security, and queries. In this 40 minutes, I will only talk about measures and calculated columns. And I color-coded everything. So if I talk about calculated columns, something on the screen will be orange. We talk about measures, to make it easier not to confuse the both, everything is color-coded in blue. I'm not talking about calculated tables here and row level security or queries. As Alberto Ferrari, if you want to learn DAX, you should know Alberto Ferrari is one of the two guys of SQL BI, Alberto Ferrari, Marco Russo. Alberto Ferrari is quoted that he said, like, DAX is easy, it's an easy syntax, but the semantics are complex, so it's hard. So if you read a DAX statement, it's really easy to understand. You get an idea what it is about. You will be able, if you understand English, if you know about Excel formulas, you will be able to understand what the formula is about, but the very specifics, they can be more involved, right? And as a beginner, this might be hard to learn about all those specifics, but the more progress you have in the language, the more you enjoy this complexity because you can like have very short code doing very complex things in a very easy way, right? A very performant way and easy way. So if we compare DAX to Excel, we see like the if function you might have seen in Excel. This is a function. Then we have three parameters, right? We have like the first parameter, which is evaluated. If this is true, then the second parameter is returned. If this is false, then the third parameter is returned. In Excel, we would write cell references like B3 or A1 or whatever. In DAX, we refer columns. That's the column name. Amount is the name of the column in brackets. And the table name where the column resides in is under single quotes, sales, right? First the table name, and then the column name. And we can also refer to measures and tables, right? Only putting the table name here, for example. So a lot of functions are the same. I will not talk about those functions too much because I don't have that much time in this talk, but I will create calculated columns on numeric columns, right? That's a more interesting part because there is more tricks involved or more confusing things involved, so to say, right? So jump over to my demo file and we create three calculated columns, the sales amount, margin, and the margin percent. And let's see how this works. So I have like this file in here. And for the demo, I use a really simple data model. I have a data table covering 2 years. I have a product table covering 4 different products. The sales table only consisting of 4 different sales, right? 3 of the products were sold, 100, 110, and 20. 130 was never sold, right? Very easy model. The reason why I'm doing this is because if the model is easy, it's also easy to like recalculate in your own mind what should be the result, the correct result, so we know that something is correct or wrong. And returning to these calculations, if you're not sure, the sales amount can be calculated as the price times quantity. The margin would be the sales amount minus costs. And the margin in percent means the margin in percent of what? In this case, it's the in percent of the sales amount. So we're dividing the margin by the sales amount. Let's jump over to my table view and to the sales table. That's the easiest way to create things for calculated columns, because it allows me, oh, this is still in German. I thought I restarted everything in English. Sorry for that. Hope you can follow along. I will pronounce the English name for this. So neue Spalte means new column. So I create a new column in here, get a new column in here, and it also tells me column here. As soon as I type writing, I don't know where I am, so I can then see that it's still I'm in column tools, and I can see like the icon here. This is a column. The first one would be the sales amount. The sales amount is nothing else than the price of the good, and I can brilliantly use IntelliSense for that. I can even make this bigger, price times the quantity. And then I get a new column called sales amount, and now show me like price is 10, quantity is 3, 30. 20 times 1 is 20, 30 times 4 is 120, 100 times 5 is 500. Then I add another column here, and this is the margin, where I take the sales amount I just calculated, the sales amount, and subtract the total cost from it. Not total MTD, but the total cost. Here we go. Right, and then I get 30 minus 25 is 5. 20 times 15 is also 5. 120 minus 75, 45, and so on and so forth. And the last one would be the calculation in percentage. So I'm not a new measure. We'll come to the measures later. I really like to make this mistake because usually I don't create columns. I only create measures. So then the last one would be the margin in percent, which would be the margin divided by the sales amount. If you want to go more specific, sales amount, then best practice is to use not the divide operator, but use the divide function. It's more performant, and you can have an alternate result in case something is wrong. For example, if the sales amount is not existent, to not put like what's called unendlich, like infinity, right? But like sort, for example, a return row, then I would be able to like pass in 0 to return 0. That's what most business users expect. And for the formatting, I don't have to multiply the result with 100, but if I just mark it as a percentage, then it will be formatted as multiplied by 100, and I get this percentage sign at the very end. So this is how we can create calculated columns. There are, if I refer a column, I usually put, or you should put, and get used to put the table name in front of it, so we can really clearly see this is a column, this is not a measure. And the calculation of the calculated column is done row by row, which sounds counterintuitive because it's a column, but we're talking about row by row calculation. But of course, it makes perfectly sense because we have had one definition for the column, and then for every row of the table, we have seen that the calculation is done 30 times 10 times 30 is 30, 3 is 30, for example. Right? The result is then persisted in the model. That means that the refresh will take longer, so everything is loaded to Power BI. Then all the calculated columns are recalculated, so it adds extra time there. But also the size of the model of the file, if the Power BI file and the memory footprint, if you open it up or store it in Power BI service, will be bigger because the result is stored and pre-calculated there. So the row context, right, rather easy to see. So the calculated column runs in the row context. We have like seen price times quantity, for example. We can just refer to price and quantity, and therefore, because in one single row, there's only one price available, only one quantity available, and that's why this can be calculated easily. And this is done row by row, right? That's what we call a row context. And we do something row by row, and we can refer a column name just by the name of the column. Nothing else there. Sounds hopefully easy, because it still is, right? If I'm using the column sales amount and margin, for example, jumping back to my demonstration here, I can then, for example, put it in here, and I put in the date column of my date table, and then put in my margin, what was the sales amount? Maybe also put in the quantity and the price and the quantity and the sales amount and the total cost and the margin. Then we should be able to see the results here. So 10 times 3 was 30 and so on and so forth. And everything is summed up, 670. How is this summed up? Because there's something called an implicit measure in Power BI. So that means the sales amount, if I click on the sales amount, I can see under the column tools that there is some regulation here this should be calculated as the sum, right? So this is the default here. That's why it's summing up those values. So they calculated row by row, and then the result in the report then sums this up by adding up the numbers, right? The same for the margin. 30 minus 25 is 5, and so on and so forth. And then these numbers are summed up to 205. For the margin, the calculation could also be 670 minus 465, would also result in 205. But it's very important that you understand this is a calculated column. That's why the calculation is then done by adding up the different numbers we see in the different rows. This is how this is working. So this works because we get this implicit measure. So what I just demonstrated here, that we get the sum here, or this definition over there, that we have like this summarization, default summarization, sum, means that Power BI had created an implicit measure for us. The measure is not visible. I cannot show it to you. This is something Power BI does. In Excel, if you connect Excel to your Power BI semantic model, in some extent, this might work or might not work if you use implicit measures. And usually you have this, not usually, but you have different settings in the model. So in the model, you can have a sum, average, minimum, maximum, count, account, discount. And in the visual, you can also change this. So the default behavior in the model might be sum, but in one of the visualizations, you want to show the average or the minimum or maximum or something, right? Curious enough, for the visualization, we have 3 extra things, standard deviation, variance, and median, which is not available as default in the model. And for some reason, count distinct and count is, the order is in different order here. I'm not sure why this is. This is since the beginning, this never changed. And the difference between count and count distinct, to make it sure, count just counts the number of rows, count distinct counts the distinct different numbers available in the column. So for example, if you have a date table with 2 years, this would cover 720 rows. So the count would be 720 because there's 720 rows in the date table. Even for the year appears 720 times, but there's only 2 different years in there. So count distinct will show 2 and count will show 720. When we now come to the margin in percent, we'll see that there's something, there's a problem here. So if I put in the margin in percent, which was perfectly fine, take a look over there. So like 5 divided by 30 is 16, 5 divided by 20 is 25. The numbers are correct. You can trust me, you can recalculate them. And if I add this in here, those numbers, not the margin, but the margin in percent, sorry for that. So I want to remove one of those guys again. So the margin in percent is what I wanted to add here. So the numbers here are the same we just have seen in the table, right? It's the same numbers. So if those numbers are correct, those numbers are also correct. But down there, we have a problem. Because if you think about what margin in percent means, a margin of 10% means if we receive a revenue of 100 euros or US dollars or whatever money from our clients, a margin of 10% means that 10 euros, 10% of the 100, 10 euros, we can keep, right? The rest covers the costs. But this is the extent of that. So a margin in percent of 109% would mean if we receive 100 euros as money from our clients, we can keep 109 euros of those. And this doesn't work, right? Because if I only get 100, so the number is clearly wrong. The reason why we see this, maybe you already know, right? So the margin in percent is also a column here, and there's a default summarization for sum. That means that those numbers are added up, and this is clearly wrong. People say that, yeah, of course, we can change this, right? We go to visualization, and then under the margin percent, we can make this an average, right? Now we have an average here. This number is somewhere between 16 and 37, so it's not clearly wrong, but it's also not clearly right, because what's the margin in percent? What kind of number do we want to see here? It's easy to calculate. You can come up with a calculator. So what we need to calculate is we need to divide the thing from the total, right? So the margin in percent is 205, that's the margin here, divided by 670, which is the sales amount, right? And this is 30.6% and not 27. So 27 is just the arithmetic or average, which is a wrong number here. We cannot just handle those single percentages and try to find out what the aggregated value should be. No, this is not possible. In this case, we cannot do that in a calculated column. We have to reach out to measures, which I introduce right next, or we can then add the sum here, we can add the sum here, that divide those two numbers with each other. So measures. measures are filtered. That means I can now create this measure, the margin percent as a measure, and also really create the sales amount and everything else also as a measure here. So I jump back to my empty here, and I have a hidden. So where is it? Show hidden, and I have this measure table in here, and I can have another, can create measures here. Why do I use this table here? Because I already have these names in my sales table, right? The sales table, there cannot be a color margin and a measure margin. So either would now have to rename margin measure or something, or put in a different column. This is what this table, that's what I'm doing here. So I'm calculating the sales amount. And the sales amount, as in we need to multiply here. So I could write sum of price. So also, first thing is, if I reach out to the price column in a measure, I cannot. So because the measure lives outside of the table, so to speak, and then it looks at the table and say, yeah, there's price, right? But there's one price column, but there's several values, right? We have like 4 different values. So if I, as a measure, would reference the price column, I don't know what do you want me to do, right? Do you need like the smallest one, the biggest one? Should I take an average? Should I take a sum or whatever? This is what we have to specify. So we have to write sum of price and then multiply by the sum of the quantity, right? If you do so, I think we'll point this out later, we will see a problem here. So I just keep it like it is and keep working forward, but it's not a good idea to sum up the prices to make a sneak preview here. The other one was the margin. The margin is then the sum of the sales amount. Let's take the column here, the sum of the sales amount, and subtract the sum of the total costs, right? If the measure would work, I would also be able to reference the measure, but the measure is not showing the right numbers correctly because I willingly introduced a problem in here. And the other one thing is for the margin percent. And this works easily because I can now say I want to divide the sum margin, right, by the sum of my sales amount. If you now compare the numbers, right? So if I now put the margin in percent, maybe I keep this average here, but I put this in here for the individual values. Let's make this a little bit better by making it percentage. Easily to compare, right? You see the same numbers per date. So this works brilliantly, but now we get the correct number at the total. So please make always sure to recalculate the things not only on the line level, but also on the total level if your calculations really work. So in a column will never work when you do divisions. If you calculate percentages or ratios, you need to reach out and create a measure, explicit measure, and you cannot do this in columns. So don't recalculate percentages in SQL, in Python, in Power Query, in Excel. That's not very helpful, right? We can't use these numbers. We need to know the calculation, how the formula is done, and then rewrite the formula then in a SX measure. So a measure, if we refer to a measure, we want to make sure that we're not referring, putting the table name in front, only referring the measure name. We omit the table name to easily spot it is a measure, not a column. And I imagine a measure as being living detached from any table rows, right? So it's not knowing about single rows, but it just looks at the whole table, sees the columns and the different values in those columns in there. And if you put a sum over something, it doesn't mean that it's always like the sum of the whole table, but the sum is after the filters are applied. And there's always a filter in the report, right? You put the filter on the year, you have like different dates, for example, in your table, and in every row there's a different filter, right? So let's put here. So there's a filter on date is 1st of July, price is 10. Here's a filter on 1st of July, price is 20 and so on. So there's different rows. That's why we get different results in here, because this is different filters applied. And the total here, the number here is not different because it's adding up. Like in the calculated column, it added those things up. It summed it up, right? But for the measure, this is not the way the measure is calculated. The measure is now applying the same formula, sum of margin and sum of sales amount on the total level, right? The difference between those individual rows and the total is, in the total, there is no filter, right? There's no filter, none of those filters are applied in the gesamt, in the total here. That's why we get different numbers divided with each other. That's why we get a different result, which is a correct result in here. So the calculation is then done multiple times. So we have one formula, like one formula as you see here, margin in percent, but this formula is calculated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And the difference is that there's different fields applied. That's why the result is different. And the result is not saved in the model. So the refresh does not take longer. The size of the model does not change, right? But it's dynamically responding to user interactions. If you put a filter there, with the cross filters, whatever, then the calculation, the result of the measure might change, right? So if we compare again calculated columns with measures, in calculated columns, we have the row context. We just refer to different columns. But in the measure, we cannot. We have to put sum, for example, in front of the sales amount. But it doesn't mean that it's always summing up the whole sales amount of the whole sales table, but it's working inside the filter context. So this is exactly what we intuitively would expect. We put in the 1st of July sales amount, and of course, I only see the sales amount of 1st of July. Makes perfectly sense, right? If you're not thinking about it, it's very logical. If you start thinking and discussing things, things might be irritating, but it is not. It's very, very, intuitively that we have this filter context applied. But measures can have like Excel formulas, which is very necessary because if I take a look on the sales amount here, right? So if I remove those columns, maybe, so I remove the margin, the percent, the sales amount I keep, right? So I have like the sales amount here is the column, this is the margin in percent. And if I now add up the sales amount as my measure, then we see like for the interval row 30, 20, 120, 500, this works perfectly fine. But in the measure, we have a problem in the total, right? We know already that like the sales amount is just the sum of these numbers, and this sums up to 670. So 2080 must be wrong. Would be great if we could just increase our sales by manipulating our measures. Maybe it's a good idea. Most probably not. So we have to of course report the correct numbers, and 2080 is not correct. What's happening there? And I've previously pointed out that's not a good idea to sum up the price, right? So summing up the price means that we put these numbers, adding up those, like this is 160, right? And then I take 160 and multiply it by 13, and this is how I get the 2080. So let's again show you what's happening there, how the 2080 come up there. So this is like 13, which is the quantity times 160, the sum of the price, 160. This is 2080, right? This is how the number appears. And the reason is because I put in sum of price, and this is not a very good idea, because if I first sum up the price and the quantity and then multiply those numbers, I get a different result, as we can see here, than if I multiply the quantity, the price individually per row, and then add up the things. So we cannot exchange as we want between multiplication and adding things, but we have to stick to a certain order. So we must first multiply and then add up. And luckily, there's a function called SUMX available, right? This is SUMX. And in SUMX, I specify I want to iterate over the sales table. And therefore, the sales table, I want to multiply the price with the quantity without putting any sum or whatever in there. So we're still in a measure, right? There's a measure, there's measure tools up there. So we're still in a measure. But now we can just refer to the price and the quantity. So with the iterator function SUMX, we can open, so to speak, a row context on the sales table and then iterate over the available rows of the sales table. So this is not the total sales table, not the whole sales table, but only the sales table for the rows available in the filter context. So if I change this here, we can see now the numbers are correct. The individual numbers are still correct. This is also correct because now in this row, it's iterating over all rows, satisfying the condition 1st of July and price of 10. There's only this row. And 30 is that the result. 10 times 30 is 30, right? 10 times 3 is 30, sorry. And so on and so forth. For the total, we have no filter applied. So it's now iterating over all 4, right? And SUMX means the result I get here is then added up. So I get this adding up like a calculated column, but now in a measure. So this is very cool that we can do that. If you're confused about sum and SUMX, the sum function, you can only put in a column reference. You cannot have an expression there. So I cannot write sum over sales price times quantity. This is not possible. The difference The other difference is not really there. Sometimes I read on the internet that some X is slower or faster than some because the one iterates over the table, the other not, which is rubbish, because if I want to sum up something, of course I have to iterate over the table. So if I just put sum of sales amount, of course, DAX has to iterate over all the rows in the sales table to find the individual sales amount numbers in order to add it up, right? So sum X is iterating, sum is also iterating. And I can always rewrite everything I can write as a sum. I could also read as a sum X, right? Not the other way around, because sum X also allowed to specify a condition here, expression here. So sales amount here again. So times sales price times quantity is now done individually, but with the sum X function, it allows me to add up those results. And yes, there's also a min X function which would return 20, or a max X function, so with two X's, max X, would return 500. Product X would multiply those numbers. This is something I rarely use. Then there's also average X. There's like 10, not like, but there's 10 iterator functions, which all iterate over something and do something like evaluate the expression, and then do something with the results, like sum X, adding up the numbers here. So now we have seen that in the calculated column, with a row context where we put in the price and the quantity directly, we can just refer to those columns and therefore calculate the sales amount. In a measure, by default, we have a filter context, which means that we have to specify the aggregation function, for example, sum, but the sum does not mean the sum of the whole table, but only sum over those rows available in the current filter context. And now we've seen we have a problem when so with that we solved like the divisions. So if you want to divide something, most probably you need a measure. Most probably you cannot use a calculated column. But the backdraft is here, if I want to multiply something, this is not possible in here, because multiplying two columns is not possible because we have to put the aggregation function here. Luckily, we have this iterator function, for example, sum X, where I open over the sales table a row context, and then I have the same formula. We can see a price times quantity. It's the very same text here and here, because here also I have a row context inside a measure. And this allows me to do calculations like multiplications. So if you write something you want to multiply, then maybe stop for a short second and think about, can I just use the sum functions to sum the price and sum the quantity and multiply, or do I need to reach out to an iterator function? That's the thing here. The fourth thing, I'm doing very good time-wise, the DAX author, that means you, can also control filters. And it's a little bit more involved, because now we talk about a function called calculate. And this function drove me crazy in the beginning. So the first things when I learned DAX, a couple of years ago, I would say, I was confused because why would I have a function called calculate? Because of course I want to calculate something. That's the whole purpose why I create a measure or a calculated column, because I want to calculate something. So why would I put calculate in front of a calculation? And there's two reasons. And one is about filter transition. We will not be able to talk about filter transition here. But the second, I will show now. Right? So we can have a reference, or like put in a measure definition where I reference the sales amount measure, and then wrap it into calculate and pass a second parameter. There can be as many parameters as you can think of. So the first, something which needs to be evaluated, and the other ones, they are there to change the filter context. So they're filter manipulators. And with product description equals A, this sounds like a filter thing. Sounds like it would be a condition. There's two options or two things people get into the mind. One half of the people think, write it like this, and they put this product A measure now here, that only for product A something appears, but not for the other ones. But it's not the case. How it is implemented by DAX and Power BI is that if I write it in this way, I get the result or the sales amount of product A for all of my rows. So what it indeed does, it overrides any existing filter context on the product description with A. So in here, for example, let's look at this line. We have a filter context on product description is B. So the sales amount is 140. But for product A, I say, no, overwrite the existing filter context. If there's a filter context, overwrite it and change it to A. That's why I still get 13 here, because 30 is the sales amount of A. In the total, There is no filter context on the product description. No problem at all. There is no filter context, but now I introduce a new filter context with product A. That's why I get the 30 here, right? And you also clearly see that, like in a measure, this is not summing up, right? If this would be sum up, I would expect 120 here. But this is not how a measure works by default, not using an iterator function. Then it's just a different filter context, and something is evaluated in this other filter context. And still, we see only product A. We can write this in a different version. So what we just have seen, this version is, syntax sugar. So it's easier to write, but as you can see, I made up some space here. What this is converted to automatically, so the performance is the same, no difference, just how things are written is that it's transitioned to something which calls the filter function. And the filter function is a table function. So it returns a table containing some of the products, right? So calculate is not really evaluating conditions, but calculate always needs tables as parameters. So even if I write it this way, this is transitioned on and changed to this, which is a table function. So this gives me all the products. So the secret here is in this all. So this is transitioned to this one. So it takes a list of all the product descriptions, not only the product available in the line in the report, but all them. And of all them, it selects then the product A. So I get the same result with this second version. It's the very same, different code, but very same result here. If I only want to see product A, I can just remove the all here, right? If I remove the all and just say reference the product table, all the available products, depending on the current filter context, from the A, all available products, only select product A, I get that the result that only for the first line something appears. Because here in the filter context, we have A, and from those products, only one product A, I want the product with A. This fits perfectly, so I get 13 here. Here I have the filter context on B, and from those products B, right? So this line, only one product is available B, all the products is just B. I want to have all the products which have description A, and this is not possible. It's either B or A. There's no product B and A, which has the same description, so nothing is appearing here, right? And in total, I get again the impression this would summing up, but it is not, because in the total here, there's all products available. There's no filter on the products. And from all the products, I select product A, which is then resulting to the sales amount of 30. This is how this works. And we can also rewrite this. There's also syntax sugar for that by wrapping the expression in keep filters. So you can have this shortcut expression as well. If you put keep filters, it would keep the existing filters, right? And you get the same result as with the previous version. Yeah. So we can change and manipulate the filter context. We can not only limit, but we can also expand the filters, as we have seen with all. If I put in sales amount and all, I get a column with always the same result, which is the sum, the total of the sales amount, right? Why would I write something like this? It's not very helpful, but you would need this as an intermediate measure to calculate, for example, what's the percentage of sales amount for A, B, C, and D, and so on, right? And I would divide 30 with 670. I cannot really reach down to the, it's not Excel, right, where I reach down to the other cells, but I can divide one measure with the other measure. For 30 divided by 670, they get the percentage result for what's kind of the percentage sales and share for product A, B, C, and D. That's how you would use that. And in many cases, people expect not the behavior of all, but the behavior of all selected, which means if I have a slicer outside the visual, that this slice is still respected. So if I want to only have product B, for example, selected, and I ask for what's the sum of all the products, in some occasions, I would say in the majority of occasions, people would expect that 140 is the sum, because this is the sum I get here, because this filter should be respected. So check out all versus all selected if you need to calculate percentages as shares, what's the expected behavior. And nothing prohibits that you introduce both measures, right? One percentage calculation on the all function and one not on the all selected. And then teach people what's the difference there. Last but not least, and that's like hitting perfectly at the end of my talk, is that it's really, really important that you accept and learn and know that calculated columns and measures are completely different things. To be honest, calculated columns and calculated tables, I consider them as a legacy. When the first version of Power BI was introduced, I already told you on one of the slides, was in Excel. So this was an add-in to Excel where we could load data to a data model similar to what we now have in Power BI, right? But at the very first version, when they introduced this, there was no Power Query. So we could not add a column, a table by starting a Power Query, doing fancy things in the UI and the M language. This was just not there. This was not possible. So the only way we could enrich the data we had loaded to Power BI, to the Power Pivot add-in, was by adding columns as a calculated column with DAX, tables as a calculated table with DAX. That's what I believe is the only reason that still we have these functions, but you should not really use them. So you should replace, especially numeric calculated columns, by measures. If you have other columns like your date table and you want to have like the month in different ways of writing, the month and the year, or the year/month and whatever, please use Power Query, do it over it in the source. It's better reusable. That's the reason why there. So, but about the differences, right? The calculated column means it increases the refresh time at the model size because the calculation is done after everything is refreshed. So we wrote all the data to Power BI, and when this is finished, all the calculated columns and tables are recalculated, increasing the time and also the model size because the result is stored in your, for example, Power BI file. In the measure, no influence on refresh time because it's not calculated on refresh time. The measure is only calculated as soon as you put it on the canvas, you put it in the visual, then it's calculated per filter context combination. As the calculated column increases the refresh time, you should only put it in small tables. That means dimension tables. Don't add anything to your fact tables, the large tables, like the sales table or something. In a measure, it doesn't increase anything, so we can have it in small and big tables. The formula of the calculated column cannot be influenced by any filter because it's calculated at refresh time. So if you hit the refresh button in Power BI, the calculated column is recalculated. At this time, it's not really known what kind of filters people will later apply to it. So there's no filter applied. Measures, they heavily react to filters because the calculation of the measure is not done at refresh time, but it's done when you look at the report. If you change the filters, if you change between pages, then the measure is recalculated, reacting to the filters. The calculated column is heavily depending on the hosting table. So you cannot just copy one calculated column to another table and hope that's working. Will not, because the column names, the table name will be different. Measures, I can move them around, right? Because I write sum of something, and this is in one table, right? And if the measure sits in the same table or a different table, like I did, I calculated the measure sales amount not in the sales table, but in the measures table, no problem. I can even like move it around, right? In the calculated column, they can directly reference other columns of the same table without any function. In a measure, never ever can you directly reference a column. You always have to put it in aggregation function or an iterator function, right? Sum, and then table name, column name, or sum x, table name, and then the references to the columns. So you have to apply some function there. As the calculated column increases the model size, you should not keep intermediate columns, right? So sometimes we have to do complex calculations, and you might put the calculation together like one step by one step, so you really can find out if all the steps are right. But at the end, for calculated column, if you even want to create a calculated column, you should try to consolidate everything in one column and not having added 20 columns to your table, but only the resulting columns. For measures, it's best practice to, I would say, that you have like these base measures, sales amount, and so on, and then you build up more complicated measures on top of those measures. So you might have different level of measures, and it's totally okay. It makes things more reusable because you do one complex calculation there and then reuse it in the other measures, and therefore things should be easier to test and easier to develop. And calculated columns, by using the summarization option, I've seen sum or average, we call them implicit measures. And they only work in Power BI. Since a good year, Excel also understands them. So if you have analyzed in Excel and connect to your Power BI semantic model, it will work. But you should always go for the explicit measures. So hide those calculated columns, hide those columns, those numeric columns, and instead add explicit measures. It's very important. The implicit measures will also not work as soon as you start using calculation groups. So maybe in a later setup, you discover, oh, it would be a good idea to not have like so many measures defined, but have my base measures and then have calculation groups where I, for example, define how the previous month or the same month in the previous year something is calculated. Calculation groups can be make your approach rather easy, right? But as soon as you introduce those calculation groups, the calculated column, the implicit measures will not work anymore in Power BI. So either you screw up then your reports, or you cannot use this feature. So it's a good idea to avoid those implicit measures from the very beginning. And with that said, I think I'm perfectly in time. Are there any questions? Back to Marcel.
Yes, Marcus, very, very impressive overview for beginners. I have a question, and if you could give beginners one rule to follow during the first month with DAX, what would it be?
Oh, one rule to follow DAX. Yeah, the most important thing would be like, start building measures, right? Don't do any calculated columns. I only teach calculated columns in my classes because it's easier to understand how this row context works. So if I create a column, as I did in the beginning, right? You create a column, and then you can, in the table view, you can see, there's a new column, and then you can see like how the calculation is done, and you can evaluate everything. This is harder to do when they do this in measures, but to do your measures, right? Everything which should be calculated, like in terms of numeric things, create a measure for that. And if you import data from the data sources, and for example, in your data source, there's like the price, there's the quantity, and there's the sales amount. My first goal is to remove the column sales amount to save space in my data model and replace it by a measure called sales amount, where they multiply those two things.
Yeah, you get from a LinkedIn user, this is a really great lecture. I think, yeah, that's it. So yeah, I want to thank you. It was a really nice session with a lot of knowledge and I think best practices. And so this is what a beginner needs, knowledge like that. So the next session is yep. So, oh yeah, Gilbert Julaviers. I hope I spelled it right. He's from Australia, and the topic is how data agents in Fabric can answer questions not available in existing reports. We are back in 12 minutes, and yeah, I wish you a nice evening. Yeah, and we see you soon. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference and enjoy Gilbert. Yeah, bye bye.
Welcome to Power Bros Knowledge, where Power Platform meets pure innovation. Your business runs on chaos, approvals lost, data scattered, time wasted. We know that pain. Now imagine automating everything, faster, smarter, and built for impact. That's where Power Bros come in, architects of digital change. We don't talk trends, we build results. Our Knowledge Hub turns expertise into action. Real tutorials, real automation, real impact. Whether it's Power Apps, Automate, Logic Apps, or Entra, we make it work together, smarter. Join the Power Bros movement. 30,000 professionals learning, building, and sharing every day. Ready to transform your workflows? Book us now, and let's build something legendary together.
Hi, I'm Sean, and I train people to become Power Platform Solutions Architects. If you're watching this, you know Power Platform, but be honest, when you're building a solution, are you using the best tools to solve the problem, or just the tools you know? If you love building powerful, scalable solutions that make your company money, let me share why our training is different. We've noticed that the best architects know a series of best practices and they apply them to every project. So we took all these best practices and put them into this course.
Stay ahead in tech with the latest Microsoft insights and updates, tailored for IT pros and C-level executives, daily on M365.fm. Your daily dose of comprehensive Microsoft expertise. News, detailed analysis, expert opinions, and insightful commentary on Azure, Microsoft 365, and more related technologies daily. Dive into in-depth discussions on security, productivity, and cloud computing, straight from the tech trenches, where experts share insights, best practices, and real-world experiences daily. Get the inside scoop on Microsoft's latest releases and how they can transform your business operations. Expert interviews, tech breakdowns, and strategic insights, all in one concise, engaging, and highly informative podcast series that delivers valuable knowledge. M365.fm is your go-to source for making informed tech decisions that drive business success through expert analysis, insightful guidance, and reliable technology recommendations daily always. Every episode is packed with highly actionable advice, the latest Microsoft news updates, and expert insights that help you stay ahead of the technology curve and make informed decisions. From cybersecurity threats to comprehensive cloud migration strategies and innovative security solutions, we've got you completely covered with expertise and proven methodologies always. Join a community of tech leaders and innovators who rely on M365.fm for their Microsoft insights. Supercharge your knowledge on Microsoft tech and stay competitive in the fast-paced IT landscape by staying updated with the latest technology trends and innovations daily. Subscribe now and get ready to elevate your tech game with the latest from M365.fm. Your next tech breakthrough is just an episode away. Tune in daily to explore new dimensions, witness futuristic innovations, and get inspired by the technologies transforming our world completely every day now. Expand your Microsoft expertise with in-depth analysis and expert commentary through detailed guides, webinars, and insightful interviews with industry thought leaders and experts daily now. Don't miss out on the latest trends and updates in the Microsoft ecosystem regularly through their official channels, and stay informed about their newest releases and behind-the-scenes developments slowly. Be the first to know about new Microsoft features and how to leverage them effectively for your business growth and operational excellence immediately every day. Your daily podcast for staying on top of Microsoft tech. No confusing jargon, just straight insights and expert analysis every single day, keeping you ahead. Make M365.fm your daily habit for staying ahead in the rapidly evolving world of Microsoft technologies and beyond. Discovering new possibilities daily with expert insights and analysis. Start listening now at M365.fm and take complete control of your Microsoft journey today with expert insights and comprehensive resources available instantly to guide you through every step.
The Microsoft ecosystem is evolving faster than ever. The Microsoft ecosystem is evolving faster than ever. The Microsoft ecosystem is evolving faster than ever.
Hi, I'm Sean, and I train people to become Power Platform Solutions Architects. If you're watching this, you know Power Platform, but be honest. When you're building a solution, are you using the best tools to solve the problem or just the tools you know? If you love building powerful, scalable solutions that make your company money, let me share why our training is different. We've noticed that the best architects know a series of best practices and they apply them to every project. So we took all these best practices and put them into this course.
The Microsoft ecosystem is evolving faster than ever. Copilot, Power Platform, security, modern work, Azure AI, new features every week, new opportunities every day. But learning is scattered. Events are expensive, limited, and difficult to access. That changes now. Welcome to M365 Con, the world's largest online Microsoft 365 convention. 2 powerful weeks, 1 week of workshops, 1 week of free global talks and keynotes. Build your own learning path with expert-led workshops. From Power Platform to security, from Copilot to Azure AI, you choose what matters to you. Then join over 60 free sessions with most valuable professionals, Microsoft trainers, architects, and innovators from around the world. Meet the community, explore the virtual expo, connect with experts, and be part of a global Microsoft experience. Accessible, global, interactive, and designed for every Microsoft 365 professional. M365 Con, your community, your learning path, your Microsoft 365 future. Welcome to Power Bros Knowledge, where Power Platform meets pure innovation. Your business runs on chaos, approvals lost, data scattered, time wasted. We know that pain. Now imagine automating everything, faster, smarter, and built for impact. That's where Power Bros come in, architects of digital change. We don't talk trends, we build results. Our Knowledge Hub turns expertise into action, real tutorials, real automation, real impact. Whether it's Power Apps, Automate, Logic Apps, or Entra, we make it work together, smarter. Join the Power Bros movement, 30,000 professionals learning, building, and sharing every day. Ready to transform your workflows? Book us now, and let's build something legendary together.
Hi, I'm Sean, and I train people to become Power Platform Solutions Architects. If you're watching this, you know Power Platform, but be honest, when you're building a solution, are you using the best tools to solve the problem, or just the tools you know? If you love building powerful, scalable solutions that make your company money, let me share why our training is different. We've noticed that the best architects know a series of best practices and they apply them to every project. So we took all these best practices and put them into this course.
Hello And a warm welcome to the M365 Con. Today here with me is Gilbert Quevillier. I hope I spelled it right. So when no, a lot, I'm sorry. The session today of our Power BI and Fabric stage is how data agents in Fabric can answer questions not available in existing reports. Well, welcome to you and greetings to Down Under. I think you'll be the only speaker from Down Under, so warm welcome to you. You could start.
It looks like your tone we doesn't hear you. You can check the microphone options in the button.
No. I can see you, but we couldn't hear you. So you can click on the plus on the wheel, and there are audio settings, and when you can click on the mic. So there could be 1, 2, 4, 5 possibilities to change the microphone in the audio settings. So this is on the wheel. No. Audio. Yeah, but if you rejoin, you just choose the microphone, the standard mic, and you can test it. So if you get no signal, it's not working.
Hello, I am back. Should be working now. Let me share screen. Thank you. Apologies for the technical issues. Let me just bring up the right screen. Yep, that's the one. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Again, apologies for the people following along. Few technical difficulties, which fortunately have been solved. So just to carry on with quickly a little bit about myself. So I'm a Microsoft Fabric and Power BI data consultant, been working in various forms of data for the past 18 years and always in the Microsoft ecospace, helping customers around Power BI and Fabric and using their data as an advantage to help customers. Okay, so in today's topic, what I'm going to be covering is how the data agent works, the data agent configuration, the difference between the data agent and Copilot, and some of the limitations that we have. So just to start off with how the data agent works. This is an AI skill that relies on generative AI. But the difference here is that the data agent can be configured versus when you use something like Copilot, for example, you can simply ask questions, put in some sample data and use it. There's no way to actually configure it or to help assist it so that it can give you the answers you are expecting to see. So with the AI skill, you can use it across different database resources and or data sources that you can say use these data sources as a source for your questions. And then in order to configure the data agent, and I'll go through all these steps in the presentation, there are actually different ways you can configure this agent, not only in terms of how it can answer questions, you can also give it some sample questions and those kind of things. So it's a lot more configuration options than your typical like AI kind of tool. So the difference between an AI skill and Copilot is that technology behind them is actually similar. They both use that generative AI that I've spoken about. And the difference here is that because you can curate data for your data agent that can answer the questions, you can actually have a lot more customization with regards to this. As well as you'll see an option with the data agent, you can actually test it before rolling it out. So you can have this like a test environment where you can run through, configure, test, make sure it's giving you answers that you expect before you release it to a wider audience in your organization. And there are some limitations around, maybe not all limitations around the data agents that we have in Fabric, but obviously it can answer the questions as well as what the data is. We're always relying on that source data in order to be able to answer the questions successfully. And another common question that I get when talking through data agents with customers and other presentations is around where does this data go when you are using the data agent? Because it's using a version of Copilot or a large language model. From my understanding, there are two areas in the world where Microsoft sends all this information, and one is in the United States and another one is France. So for some organizations, especially, for example, here in Australia, the Australian government says the data cannot leave Australia. So in that example, the government then will not look potentially to use a data agent because that data agent data, if I query something here, is actually going across the wire potentially to, I'm not sure which is closer, actually France or the US, doing what it needs to do and then returning that data back. The data is all secure, it is all encrypted. As far as my understanding goes, it's all running on Microsoft's backbone network. So it's not publicly available, but it is something that is available and something to be aware of when working through this and thinking about it. Hopefully, the organizations are comfortable, using Microsoft's existing, say, M365 services. So you're well aware of how to secure it and how it all works. especially in today's world where, data is key to be able to be secure by default. Okay, and this is pretty much my second the requirements. So in order to run a data agent, there are some requirements. So what you need is a Fabric capacity resource. So that can be any Fabric capacity from an F2 upwards, which is great because when this first started, it used to be an F64. So it's great that they've removed that barrier. And I'll show you there's a data agent tenant switch, the Copilot tenant switch, the cross-geo sharing AI is enabled, and then you need some data. So that could be a warehouse, a lakehouse, and more recently also a semantic model, which I'll show in this example. So these are just for looking at starting with the data agent. And then this is my final slide. So what I'm going to be walking through today is just explain some sample data, create the data agent, run some sample queries, provide instructions, give examples. And these all seem very similar, but I'll show you when I'm going through it that actually, there's different things that you can do in here, how to publish and share. And then obviously if you publish it and share it, what are the different ways that people can interact with these data agents, which they keep on improving and adding more value to that. Okay, so let me just step out of this. Okay, so now what we have on my screen is I have got, I'm just in my tenant, and as you can see, I'm running it says premium content, but I'm running a Fabric capacity enabled workspace. And if I go in here and I go into my admin portal, obviously these are permissions that you would potentially need to have, or you can work with your network administrators to do this. So if I just go over here, just to show you that you need to have the data agent item type enabled, as well as then for Copilot. If you scroll down over here, you can see obviously users need to have access. It can be sent outside the organization is enabled. And yeah, those are the options, and can go across items. So those are the requirements that you need to have configured, which can, when you set them up, can take a couple minutes to get started and to get going. Okay, so just a quick explanation of my data and what I have. So what we have over here is, if I go into, this is the good old AdventureWorks database that I'm having over here, and as you can see, what I pretty much have is I have some city, customer, date, employee, and stock items. So basically just some sales, selling information that I have. That is something that we're going to use to configure today. And then what we also have is, more recently, you can also add a SQL Database as a source. This is something I think in the last 2 months that's come about. And again, this is just to show you that the functionality exists and that it does work. So that might take a second or three. And as you can see over here, I have got some more sales order information in there. And then finally, I'll just show you the reports. I've also got some sales and ordering information in my semantic model. So typically, when you're working through and wanting to create data agents, you've got to have some questions that the users want to ask. And a lot of the time, typically these might already be in semantic models and in lake houses, as in this example, where you've got the data already there. So, you can create reports based on user requirements. Those user requirements are normally, hey, this is generally what we like to see. But what typically happens is someone, before they're going into a meeting, says, hey, I'm just interested in how many returning customers we had in the last 6 months. And that's something that is in the report. You can definitely create it, but quite often it takes time and effort. And if there's not, for example, like over here, we have Power BI model, if the DAX measure isn't created, it's not super quick to get that all created. So those are just some of the things to think about. So when we're ready to go, next thing what we need to do is need to create the actual data agent. So what we can then do is you can just go new item, and here you can see I've got it as my favorite as a data agent preview. And the first thing that will come up will be to give it a name. So I'm just going to give it a name of just DA for data agent and then M365. Then click on create. So once you come in here, it does give you a few tips, in terms of what to do. You need to add some data, ask a question, and improve the accuracy. So the first thing we will do is we'll click on here and we'll add some data. So we'll just say, okay, we want a data source. And in our example, we're first going to select the Lakehouse that I mentioned earlier. And then what you can see is when you bring this in, it's gone away, but it was quite quick. But basically, you don't have to select all the tables that you bring in, because sometimes, especially like in a Lakehouse or warehouse, you can have a lot of tables in there that do different things, and you might want to configure, say, a data agent that's only going to answer questions around sales and orders, but you could have some other information in there that you don't want to use. So what we're going to do, what you then do is you actually select the tables that you want to be used for the data agent. So over here, I'm going to select all of them, because in this example, it's just a few tables that we actually want to add. Next, I'm going to add my second data source, which is going to be, I lost it now. Yes, I do. It is. Let me just jump over. What did I call it now? Just lost the. What was it? Sorry, I've just lost the name, because normally these things are. Let me just jump to another one quickly so I can find the right name. Otherwise, it gets a bit tricky. Just log in. And what is it? WW Sales Azure 25. Okay. Let's just go over here. Hopefully this, yep, that looks the right one. Let's add that in. And again, when adding in your semantic model, you can also then select the tables that we want to use. So once again, I'm going to select all the tables that we want to bring in to do this. Okay, so what you can almost do is straight off the bat, you can actually ask some questions just when you're configuring it as it is. So for example, let's just try and say, how many orders do I have? And I know this is something that is typically in a report, but this is just to give you a quick overview that you can actually start using it. And what you'll see, depending on the semantic model or the Lakehouse, the more you use it, the quicker it will get, because I haven't used this in a little while. It's probably just needed to be loaded into memory. So what you can see over here, it comes up and tells me how many orders I have. But what you can actually do, and especially when you are in this debugging or development experiences, you can actually click on the details and it will actually show you what it is using. So in this example, it used the semantic model. It then used this DAX measure, and will actually show you the DAX measure. And this is important because when you configuring, which we'll do shortly, and setting this up, you want to make sure that it's using your instructions to get the answers that you're after. Okay, so what you can then do is, ideally, you want to set this up and give it some prompts that you want to do. So if you click on setup, you'll see there's some agent instructions here. And these agent instructions is what I spoke of earlier, is where you can actually now give it some details in terms of how to answer certain things. So what I'm going to do is this is now using the markdown language. So I'm just going to copy some code that I have instead of me having to write this all out, and I'll explain it in a second. So if I just come in here and just where did my mouse go? And I just paste this in over here. What you should then see is below, I now have got my information in the markdown language. So pretty much, ideally what you want to do is you want to put these in different sections. This will also help the data agent understand these instructions. So what you can see in this example over here, I'm going to be talking or asking questions around sales and orders. So what I want to specify here is I have my two data sources, which you can see I have over here, the Lakehouse and the sales. And basically what I want to say is use the semantic model for anything that is relating to an order, because as you can see, I have got order data in my semantic model. And then use the Lakehouse for anything about sales, because I have got some sales information in there. The thing you can also do with this, which is what you could do previously with Power BI Q&A, is you can also give it like synonym type of information. For example, if the word spent is used, then use Lakehouse, meaning spent equals sales. If the word order or ordered is used, then use the Lakehouse. So, quite often businesses have got acronyms or multiple names that mean the same thing. So you can put this into the configuration so that it will interpret that and go to the right place you're expecting it to go. And then an important one is to use date to extract specific time periods, for example, year, month, when performing time-based analysis. And then finally, this DAX queries over here. This is where, if you start getting to something a little bit more advanced, where I read a blog by Chris Webb, is where you can actually give it some details around a particular DAX query that someone might want to run. And this is almost a question that they might want to ask. And then below is the actual DAX query. And I know you can format the DAX query into an actual code block and markdown. So that's also something that you can do. And I'll circle back to this DAX query to show you how this works in a little while. So now we can start testing this. So for example, I could just, because now I've configured it, ideally I'm just going to start with some standard questions just to make sure. For example, if I say how many orders in the last quarter, and put that in, that because I've said for orders it must use the semantic model, let's make sure it's using the semantic models and runs the correct query. And again, as you can see, I put in the last quarter. I didn't actually specify what year I'm in, etc. So this might so you can see over here it says there's 18,000 orders, and what you can see over here, what it's done is it's used the previous quarter DAX function to actually do that. And the way that it's determined that is by getting the last date that we have and going back to the previous quarter. So again, these are things that you can do to have a look into to make sure it works. But now what you could also start testing is typically some of those questions that you won't have in a report, or they are in a report, but they might be quite hard to dig out. For example, how many customers spent more than $100? So what you'll see over here is I'm using the word spent, which I had specified in here. There's no spent actually in the data natively. So what it's actually doing is it's saying, using the word spent, it's going to the Lakehouse. And this time you can see, if we expand this, it's actually gone to the Lakehouse. And this time it's actually written a SQL query because it's using the SQL endpoint. And you can see, it's just given us a count and found the customers. And what you can see over here, it's using the total including tax as a default for the spend. So that might be the right column, it might be the wrong column. So if that's the wrong column, then you could come up here, edit your common queries in order to say, no, use this column when using the Lakehouse. So The other interesting thing you can do here, typically, we can test out, for example, you could say, we could try and say how many customers returned in the last year. So again, this is something that we can do, for example, in Power BI and using DAX, but it typically, you got to create a measure. It can get quite complex, can take quite a while to run. And what you can see over here, it says no customers, because I'm pretty confident my data that I have now that we're in 2026 is not them. What we should see is over here, it has gone through and looked at the calendar table. And the calendar table, I don't think I have information for 2026. So while that's not the right answer, it is important that you can do that. So we could try another one, say how many, let's go, how many customers spent less than, let's just go, $50 by year. So again, this is something that you can have in your semantic model, but typically if it's not configured or in your reporting, that might take a little while. So here I'm actually saying I want to see it by those different years, and just trying to understand, okay, so I'm not having, but you can see that it's pretty much going through and probably, so here it's actually saying, so this is a good use case where I haven't provided enough information in the data agent instructions in order for it to successfully answer that question. So this is part of the experience of using data agents, is to typically come up with a set of questions that you think your organization is interested in, if it's around customers, what it's particularly about, and then making sure that it's configured or that you can answer these questions. Because in this environment that we're at, this is a test environment. So ideally, your customers or the people going to be consuming the data agents do not have access, or you might be tweaking changes that they have not seen yet. So that is always something to be aware of. So moving on from there, once you test this and you're fairly happy with what you have over here, the other thing you can do is, if you go back to the setup, you can actually have some data sources have additional instructions. So you can see for the lakehouse, I could specify additional instructions in there. But what you also have is you have an option here for some example queries. So these are typically example queries are when there's standard questions that people are going to ask, and you want to provide a mechanism that can answer those questions successfully. So for example, over here, what I could do is I could add in a question that says, what is the average price by customer? And then, because the data agent is using SQL, I'll just come in here. I could then actually put in that SQL. So you can see over here is where I'm then curating that SQL answer that we have. And the nice thing here, as soon as that gets validated, I could then come up over here and ask the same question. So it's really quick in terms of when you're working through this, can I actually see what it's actually doing? So as you can see over here it is using the code. Oh, let's just go over here. That just skipped through. Let's just be answering the question that that I've used. It's used that code as a basis to go through and do that. The nice thing you can do here, for example, is you can actually, one way is you can, if you keep on adding questions, you can export them all, as well as if I come over here, I can actually then have a JSON file that has got all that information. And what you'll now see we have over here is it's added in all those additional queries that we have. So again, this just makes it a lot easier over time to have potentially a set of questions that you know that are going to be asked, and you can save those configs because it's not something you want to have to be doing manually. So I just see there's a quick comment around the difference between this agent and the MCP server. So the difference with, from my understanding, and I'm definitely not an AI expert, is this agent is used to answer questions within the data that you have within Microsoft Fabric, versus an MCP server is something that is used to basically run some questions and change configs or change code and that kind of stuff. This data agent is more around answering questions with your data, if that makes sense. Okay. So when we go back over here, what I wanted to do is circle back over here to this agent example over here, this DAX query. So in this DAX query, it's where it's doing some ABC analysis. So if I had to take the sample question over here, when I'm basically questioning, do some ABC analysis on the order table, grouping it into 3 columns where they have the different boundaries of 50,000 and 100,000, I can then run that. And now what we want to see is that this is now going to be running against the semantic models, which we said it was a DAX measure, and we should get some answers coming through in a little bit. This might take a little bit longer because obviously the DAX is a little bit more complex. You can see, and now you can see, it fell into, we had 312 sales. There were no orders in Group B or in Group C. And again, you can see, scroll down here, that it was using the DAX measure we created. The good thing with the data agents is now if I come in here and I'll use a very similar question, but now I've changed the differences where I've said the upper boundary is 10,000 instead of 100,000, and I've changed the dates and now run this, it is smart enough to know that it's now going to modify the DAX, because if you see here on the left, it's actually sort of hard-coded, these upper boundaries and these lower boundaries. So the data agent is smart enough to be able to take that as a pattern base and then apply it to your questions that you're asking. So the other advantage using data agents is it can actually change, the data agent can understand what's going on and then make changes to your queries that the users are going to get the answers that they're expecting. And also when you're configuring this, you don't have to try and think of every single scenario to configure. You actually can just say, okay, I have this kind of pattern, and obviously it needs to be tested, but you can then make sure it gets working. And as you can see over here, this is now going through, and we now have a different order where up above was just 312, but because we changed the criteria, we now have got some data in Group A and Group B. Okay, so now once we're happy with this configuration and have used the, we're happy to do it, we can now publish this. So right now, because it's not published, it's almost not usable. So when we click publish, what we'll see over here is we got a name. You can give an explanation. So we can say answering questions about sales and orders. And there's this new toggle button, which is great to finally see. Over here it says also publish to the agent store in M365 Copilot. So I'm actually going to enable that and click on publish. So what this means now is this data agent will be available in Microsoft Teams and Microsoft M365 Copilot if you have it available. So previously there were certain ways you could use the data agent. One was within Fabric, which I'll show you, and the other was using the APIs, which I'll also show you. But it became a bit of a challenge, and what Microsoft has done, they've now made it easier to surface these data agents in order to use them across your organization. So I'm going to click on publish. So that should take a second or 3. Okay, so what you can see here is once you've done this, there's an option over here which says your draft and your published version. So what this now means is you can have a published version that everyone is using. You might want to bring in some additional data sources. So say, for example, I had to come in here and let's just say I wanted a SQL server. I could then add this in, but I still need to configure my new data source and potentially update the markdown that we have over here and say select my additional tables that I need. So when you're working in the draft version, you can work with it, make some changes, test it, make sure it's at a point that you're happy with. And then what you can do is you can then republish it, and then it'll take those changes and publish them. As well as you can also just work between the draft and the published version. So as you can see over here, I can just come to the published version or the draft. I have got the SQL Server data source agent. The other way you can also share this is typically people also need to have access to the data agent in order to consume the data agent. So you get the different options how you can share it with people. You also get the different, in terms of the permissions that you have over here. So if you just want to share it, people will be able to use it, edit and view the details. So these are people who can edit and view the data agent. You might have one other people help configure it. And then you have ones you can view the details but not make any changes. So that's almost like where they can see this view to understand what's going on but not actually make any changes. So it is one of the things you have to do is you got to share the data agent with other users in your organization. So that makes it a lot easier. The other question that also comes up is everything now in Fabric can be version controlled or source control. So you can add this to your Git or upload this, because one of the things with Fabric is you need to back all these items up that you have in your tenant, because from my understanding, Microsoft will back up OneLake as part of its strategy, but all the other items, well, they're not guaranteed to be there. So you need to make sure you have copies, for example, of the data agent, because this is more like a configuration. So just something to be aware of. So next, when consuming the data agent, so you've got it configured, you've shared it with people, and now how can they actually interact with it? So one of the ways that they can do it is just by coming in through the link, which pretty much will give them, if I have to just go to the published version, they will see something along this line. So they can come in here and say, how many cells did I get? Okay. Again, I'm just using some simpler terminology, but you can see over here it's also showed you how many cells I had overall, and it's showed me the total number of cells, so I can see what's going on with regards to that. So that is one of the ways, just straight within Fabric, you just give them a link to the skill, and if they've got permissions, and as well as they would need to have permissions to the underlying data sources is something you've also got to have configured, because obviously we now have OneLake security, and with OneLake security you want to make sure that you've got everything secure by default. So the users typically would have, in this example, have to have read access to the lakehouse and read permissions to the semantic model. So the other way you now can consume this, which is making it a lot easier, is let me just, before going to the easier one. So what you can do is if you click on the settings, what you can see over here, when you publish this, you actually have got the URL to connect to this programmatically. So this is something that you can actually use if you want to use another application to interface with this, where it's going to ask some questions, and then provide the answer. So this is just something to be aware of, that if you want to do this, you can also do this programmatically. So it can be embedded into another application. And there is some documentation around that, typically by clicking on the learn more in terms of how to actually do that. And then what you'll see over here is you can also use this as an MCP server. I'm not 100% sure. This is something fairly new to me, but it looks like you can then use this as an MCP server in another application. Okay, so now if you want your end users to say, hey, what is the easy way for them to use this report? One of the options you can do is within Microsoft Fabric or Power BI, as long as you have the Copilot option enabled. When you say, you want to ask some questions about your data, if you click on the little plus sign, what you'll see is there's an option for data agents. So you can actually specify that this is the data agent that you have. So here, once again, if I say how many customers placed an order by year, let's see how that goes. And again, as you can see, what I'm trying to show you the value here is each time I'm asking a slightly different question to the data agent, just to show you how flexible it can be. And a lot of these questions I'm actually just making up on the fly, to be totally honest. I know that I have orders, I know that I have customers, and just trying to do that. So again, this one might take a little bit longer because it's on the semantic model. So it's potentially going to be doing something like a distinct count. So as you can see over here, it says, okay, I've got the same amount of customers over the year. But the thing you can see over here is it's a lot more what you'd expect through a chat-based. It's just giving you the answers, it's telling you what it's used. And if you need to, you can actually go through and see the answer details. So as you can see over here, I've clicked through, and now it's basically, it's gone through, said, give me the dates, unique customers, and doing a distinct count on the customer key and giving me that information. So once again, a lot of the times I think users will be happy. That's the answer that they're looking for, and that is where they are most interested to do that. The other way you can now do this is let me just where is my Teams, which I think has closed down. So let me just open that up in a second. So the other place that you can now do this is in Microsoft Teams. So let me just bring it up. It's just had an update, which fortunately wasn't busy using it. So I'm just trying to get to the right tenant. It's obviously now thinking. So what I'll do is, if I go to my M365 Copilot, which we have over here, what you can now see is it's actually already brought through my data agents that I have just used. So again, over here, I can say, this should be how many orders did I have by customer, apologies. And so now what you can see over here, it's giving us a bit more detail. It says it's actually connecting to the data agent MCP server. So that could be how this is now interfacing. Obviously, I wasn't quite sure how it would work so seamlessly between the two. So it looks like what is happening is it is now using that data agent. And what you can see over here, which is interesting, it is actually, because it's using the data agent MCP server, it's actually given me quite a lot of different information. It's a little different to the other one, which is quite interesting. So you can see over here, it's actually, so the question I actually asked was slightly different, to be fair. It said, how many orders did I have by customer and year? So what it's actually done is given me the customer and given me the different years that that it has done. So as you can see now, because I'm using M365 Copilot, it's asking me more prompts around, what I would like to do follow up. So that's really good to see that it has done that. You can see what it's doing. So I just wanted to see in here, you can see the sources is the data agent, and going through and showing you how to do that. So the other option to do that is also now, which is really valuable, is if I go to Microsoft Teams, I now also get this data agent popping up in here. So let's go over here. Let's just copy it. And if I come in here and ask the same question, ideally I should get the same answer. So this functionality has only been released like in the past month or less than a month. And I think this is great, because what this means is all that work that's done in Fabric, you don't have to direct people to Fabric. Instead, you can create the data agent, configure the permissions, etc., what they need to see. And then the users can just use their typical tool, which for me, a lot of the time, especially when going into meetings or we have these questions that are outside of the reporting, they can now just actually come in here and quickly ask the question. And again, yeah, it took a couple seconds to run, but it's way quicker than going to someone and saying, hey, can you do this for me? And it takes him 10-15 minutes to get you that actual answer to do that. Okay, so those are the different types of experiences that you can use once you configure this data agent. And I think there's a lot of value in having this with people in your organization or customers, because you've now done all the hard work creating semantic models, lake houses, cleaning the data, etc. And now people can just start asking questions against that data. So one of the things that typically people also ask around is, how can I see what capacity this is using, what's actually going on? So what I have over here is I'm using the new capacity, the real-time events that is actually running on, or did I put this in? Let me just make sure. I think this is slightly, no, this one over here needs to be, let me just do this. So this is the data source is ML. Let me run this for the last 1 day. And now what you can see, today is the 22nd. Let me just sort this. Sending, has the data not come in yet? Oh. So what you'll see, I might have just changed this query for some reason or other, but what you'll be able to see is that how much capacity it is using. So as you can see over here, for example, you can see how much it's utilizing, how many capacity units, etc. It is actually using. And the other way to do it, don't think this is running. Oh, there we go. Sorry, here you can see, and again, this is so you can see over here, it's a little bit early here, but you can see when I started using the data agents, this is a real-time feed that is coming through. And as you can see, I started running some queries and it was basically using about 2,000 capacity units. And then now it's using about 4,000 capacity units. So the other way to do this quickly is if I just go to my capacity metrics, just have a quick look to see, because if I recall, and I just want to double check before I confirm, I think this uses background capacity units, which is a lot more forgiving in terms of when you're running these kind of things. The capacity units will then be smooth over the next 24 hours versus a report is using interactive, which is measured every 5 minutes. So it can be a little different. So let me just go through over here. Just got to click through this new experience to do that. And let's just see over here. It might take a little while, and that's why with the new real-time capacity events, it's a lot more intuitive and a lot more quicker in terms of what it's actually doing. So if I just come over here, this is for today, I should be able to draw through. And as you can see, let's just go through over here. This will be a quick way to understand, just so I can confirm that it actually is using the, make that a bit bigger, background. Yeah, so as you can see over here, this is what I just wanted to double check and confirm, is that it is using the background operations, which means this will get smoothed over the next 24 hours, which makes it great to see that that is actually happening. So as you can see over here, here's my capacity units. It's been running some queries, and so just so that yes, it is going to consume capacity, but that's going to be smooth over the last 24 hours. So again, you also want to monitor this to see how people are using it, because typically, I think in the beginning, people will be using this quite a lot, and just to try it out. But over time, I think it should tail off and just be used more for business processes, that kind of thing. So that is the end of my presentation. So thank you for following along. If you ever have any questions or need some information, you're more than welcome to get me in LinkedIn or on Twitter or X.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Gilbert. This was really good. So we have a question from a LinkedIn user. I'm interested to understand the difference between this agent and MCP server. I'm confused. What is the difference?
Yeah. So my understanding, and I'm definitely not an AI expert, so to say, but the difference is with the data agent, it's something that only consumes data from within Fabric. So with your data sources that you've created in Microsoft Fabric, that you can then configure and answer questions. And for me, an MCP server is something that you use to integrate with code that it understands the metadata. It can then help answer questions around it. But but I did see in my presentation there's a new option for a data agent MCP server. So I think it's starting to blur the lines a little bit, to be totally honest.
Yeah, it's an index machine, so I understand MCP server. It's understand the context of a data. This is special for that. And for example, we had a lot of experts who talk about MCP, and for example, SharePoint has no MCP because it's really hard for Microsoft to find a solution to get this list content into an context, and that's why it wears an MCP for Outlook, for Fabric, and so on, but not for SharePoint. But I have another question. So this is I'm born in Germany, so I'm a German guy, and all the German people are very regulated, and my question is regarding to the security, the data agents, how respect the row level security, data sensitivity, and compliance rules.
Yeah, so all the data, typically because it's using the one lake under the hood, it then applies that one lake security model within Fabric to that. So, for example, if you give someone access to the data agent, but they don't have access to the underlying data source, the data agent won't answer any questions, because it says, yes, you've got access to the data agent, right? We're now going to query the data source. No, you don't have access to that data source. So it won't basically answer those questions or give you data that you don't have access to. So because everything in Microsoft Fabric is secured through the one lake security model, always at the lowest level just to ensure, that all the data is secure.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, it was amazing session, but the time is running out again now. So where is the time? It was really, really good. So this was a topic that I think we have tomorrow and co-pilot day, the whole day with speakers. There's nothing similar like that. So I think this was really, really nice, and it was amazing that you pointed this out. And I hope we see us again. And the next session is in 5 minutes or 4. With building a true single source of truth in Microsoft Fabric with one lake. So have a nice. For you, it's morning. Yeah,
Morning,
you
yes,
have a full day. Have a nice full day. Enjoy your day. So we this is our last session. So see you again. Bye bye.
Okay, thank you. See ya. Bye.
The Microsoft ecosystem is evolving faster than ever. Copilot, Power Platform, security, modern work, Azure AI, new features every week, new opportunities every day. But learning is scattered. Events are expensive, limited, and difficult to access. That changes now. Welcome to M365 Con, the world's largest online Microsoft 365 convention. 2 powerful weeks, 1 week of workshops, 1 week of free global talks and keynotes. Build your own learning path with expert-led workshops. From Power Platform to security, from Copilot to Azure AI, you choose what matters to you. Then join over 60 free sessions with most valuable professionals, Microsoft trainers, architects, and innovators from around the world. Meet the community, explore the virtual expo, connect with experts, and be part of a global Microsoft experience. Accessible, global, interactive, and designed for every Microsoft 365 professional. M365 Con, your community, your learning path, your Microsoft 365 future. Welcome to Power Bros Knowledge, where Power Platform meets pure innovation. Your business runs on chaos, approvals lost, data scattered, time wasted. We know that pain. Now imagine automating everything, faster, smarter, and built for impact. That's where Power Bros come in, architects of digital change. We don't talk trends, we build results. Our Knowledge Hub turns expertise into action, real tutorials, real automation, real impact. Whether it's Power Apps, Automate, Logic Apps, or Entra, we make it work together, smarter. Join the Power Bros movement, 30,000 professionals learning, building, and sharing every day. Ready to transform your workflows? Book us now, and let's build something legendary together.
Hello and welcome to our last session of the M365 Con on the Power BI and Fabric stage for today. Today here with me is Abayumi Abiodun, and we are talking about the topic building a true single source of truth in Microsoft Fabric with one lake. So Abayumi, you must share yours. You must unmute. So we could not hear you.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you. So
Okay.
the stage is yours. Warm welcome to you.
Thanks so much. I'm so sorry I will not be able to on my camera. So I believe you can hear me. You can hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you. Now you muted again, Abayumi.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm trying to share my screen. So a minute, please. Okay. Can you see my screen, please?
Yes, we see the screen. Thank you.
Okay. A minute, please. Okay. Good day, everyone. My name is Abayomi Abiodun, and I'm Microsoft's most valuable professional. So tonight I will be talking about. Oh, sorry, from my own side, I think this is pretty nice here. So I'll be talking on building true source of truth with Microsoft Fabrics, which is one link. So I will be sharing some tips or insights from this slide, and I'll also be I'm going to show some demo version at the end of the towards the end of my talk. So what are the single source of truth, and what are the rules of one lake in Microsoft Fabrics, and also governance and trust, medallions, architectures in fabrics, analyticals, analytics and BI consumptions, and business impact. So all these will be my major focus. Just trying to say one or two things, explaining what they are and what they really mean in Microsoft Fabrics. So single source of truth. Just when we are building Microsoft Fabrics. Let me show. I think I've opened it here. Or let me see. Oh, let me see my Microsoft Fabrics here. I want to quickly show something on the. Okay, I think I'll come back to that. So what my one lake in Microsoft Fabrics basically is used in the storing our data, just like warehouse. There are a lot of databases that we can use, but what one lake help us to do is it's ensure and it make it easy for data engineer, data scientists, data analysts to be able to work together in a single environment and for them to have access to a single data. So they work with one govern, like they are the one lake is one governed, one trusted, and also consistent data foundation for analytics. That is in one centralized side that is one trusted. There is no data leakage. Data scientists, data engineer, data analysts can easily work together in this centralized database, and also it also eliminate data silos, also duplication for organization, copying your data from like before Microsoft Fabrics, and before the for before the one lake, when data scientists, data engineer, data analysts are working together, the for some organization they need to copy data from one database to the other for them to be able to work together. But when we are working with one lake in Microsoft Fabrics, it's much easier to eliminate these data duplicates. Organization don't necessarily need to be copying data from one database to the other before their data team can work together. So also data duplication, they don't need to copy it. Conflicts matrix, this is going to help them to eliminate that while working in a single source of truth, which is the one lake. So, so some of the rules of one lakes are just like it serves the single unified data lake for all workload because it's a centralized database where all the teams can easily work together. The data engineer, the data scientist, the analyst, like they can also work on the data warehousing and do some real time analytics. And this some of the things that data different roles of all these particular data team working together, what they do, just like for data engineer now, it ingest and they ingest and transform data, and one lake make it easier for them to have access to this data. They also connect directly to one lake for storage and processing. And while working on this, it's much easier for data analysts, data scientists, and data engineer to see this, why the data engineer is working on his own part in the data team, like working on their own part, and this give them the easy access to working from a single source of data. So for data science too, they support advanced analytics, machine learning. All these are just like their basic role, and one lake make it easier for them to be able to connect and work together. So for the optimization structures, relational analytics also in form of working with the data warehousing, real-time analytics, and analytical store. One lake help, and it make all this very easy for them to be able to connect with a single source of data base or data set. So Microsoft Fabric's One Lake integration also, it works seamlessly with Power BI. I believe most of our speakers have speaks on different area using the Power BI in the Microsoft Fabrics, and also demonstrating some demos on how you can go about it. So Microsoft Fabrics One Lake integration works seamlessly with Power BI, Synapses, and Data Factory. It's also the governance and security layers also ensure compliances and data protection. So it's much easier for organization to work from a single source without any data leakage. So this One Lake is very it's seamless and very easy to use, and it eradicates data silos and ensure different different roles, just like data engineer, data scientist, data analyst, able to work together seamlessly without uh, conflicts, and make it easier for them to work together. And governance and trust. So we have governance pillar, which are data security. They protect. Most of organizations are always skeptical, or they don't want their data to leak to the public, for people to have access to their database, or have some access to some of the informations about their organization, especially in terms of data and data privacies and the likes. But when it comes to One Lake, this also help in data security. When you are working with One Lake in Microsoft Fabrics, organizations are aware, assured that their data is more secured and is going to just be within their data team. So compliances ensure alignment with regulatory standards, and also access control. There are role-based permissions while working on Microsoft Fabrics, and working with One Lake in Microsoft Fabrics. There are also access control permission that won't really allow what a data engineer should do. A data scientist may not be able to. So when this is being assigned based on their role, they were able to they're going to be able to have access based on their own role. So we also have auditing. So data can also be tracked, and their usage can also be tracked and changed for accountability. So in while working on One Lake in Microsoft Fabrics, usage can easily be tracked. So, and this will make the data team to be accountable for their actions on the while working with the One Lake. So we also have trust pillar like data lineage, transparency, privacy. So this One Lake make all these very seamless and very easy for the data team to be able to work with. And then connected service, just like Power BI, Snapseed, and Data Factory. While working with One Lake, all these make easy visuals, analytics, building dashboard. A data analyst or BI developer can easily connect to One Lake to have access to the data, and for a BI developer or data analyst to be able to have access to the data and build dashboard, different kind of dashboard a BI developer want to build. So we also have big data and warehousing, and data movement and transformation. So this One Lake make it easier for all this to be easily performed while working on Microsoft Fabrics. And we also have Medallion architectures in Fabric. So it's also a lakehouse design pattern that structure data into three progressive layers. So while working on them, you see bronze, silver, gold, and what are their purpose, and what are the data characteristics why you are working on this architecture. So you see raw injection, bronze is used for raw injection, while silver is enriched data, and then gold is created data. And these are just like basic characteristics of what can be performed, or their data characteristics. So we use them on filters, semi-structured, or structured data from different source or system can easily be categorized in this, and also we can clean, transform, and join data and business logic to apply. So there are high qualities and analytic ready data for reporting, machine learning as well. And we also have why we use it. So it helps us in simplifying data pipeline and also improve data quality through progressive refinement, and enable governance and trust, because organizations are more interested in the governance part of it, and also having trust in the system. So we also have support multiple workload like Power BI, Synapses, data factories from a single lake house, because one lake is from lake house. So we also have like BI consumptions and how they use them. So their component, one lake, Power BI, Synapses Analytics, data factories, and these are like role in analytics and BI. So one lake is centralized data lake storing structures and unstructured data. So we can, with the head of one lake, we can store structured data, we can store unstructured data, and these data can be used with our by the data team in an organization working on a project. So they is centralized data where all the data teams can have access to data and be able to perform what they want to do on the data. So Power BI can also be connected directly to the one lake to build dashboard, to clean data, to write some DAX formula, depending on what the BI team want to perform. We also have Synapses Analytics, so working with big data processing, and also some SQL or SQL queries and machine learning. So all these things are more easier to work on with data, with one lake, and data factory as well. We can orchestrate data pipeline to ingest, transform, and also prepare data for consumption. So one lake key benefit in analytics and BI consumption, we have unified data access. This make it easy for different part of the team to be able to have access to a single source or a centralized source of data that can be worked on, and this helps in eliminating data silos and also real-time insight. So Power BI can visualize data as soon as it's updated when we are working directly with a live database, and once this is connected to the one lake, it make it easier for real-time insight and real-time analytics. So, and also unified data access, and we can scalable analytics as well. Synapses handle large scale query, so we can use large query, we can model, we can do a lot of things with one lake as our central source of data source for our data team. So we can also automate pipeline. So data factory ensure clean, timely data delivery. So we can easily um pipelines using one lake. So I'm going to show my I'm going to show Microsoft Fabrics now. Okay. Hmm. I want to. Okay. Okay. I quickly want to run this just to show some. So I believe we've seen Microsoft Fabrics before, or we've used it in one way or the other. So this is Microsoft Fabrics interface, and okay. So this is Microsoft Fabrics interface, and this is one lake catalog. We have different on our one lake catalog as well. We can check our govern. We can explore a lot of things there, and also we can check our govern. We can check our governance status, and we can use this to monitor the the insight of what is going on our going on with uh, our one league. So checking our governance status here, we can see these are just like basic things here. So this will help us to monitor some of the progression of the works that is being carried on, or the data inside the one lake. So we can check our semantic models here. We can check our synopsis notebooks, and check the we can also monitor, we can track the status of activities across the fabric work space as well. So we can check all this here, and we can also check our data knowledge and impact analysis. So all these things are easy to check here. We can also check our uh we can also check by users here, and also fill security role. So security role is also important for us to be able to monitor what is going on in our Microsoft Fabrics. And here we can easily create, if I'm checking my, okay, let me click on this to see. So these are just like basic one lake catalog governance reports. We can also check this to check some of the things that can be done here. And you can see action mayor, visuals, empties, mayors, and all items. And so we can check that here, and we can create new reports here if you want to. If you are trying to create a report, we can create a new report here, and we can easily connect to this if I've uploaded a data, or if I've connected my one lake to a live database, or I can either upload my data on here, or I can also try to connect this to a live database, and I can easily have access to it here if I want to build a dashboard. And I can also try to uh, create a notebook if I want to also create a notebook as a data scientist. If you want to create a notebook to to be able to connect to your data source, and to be able to do some data processing and build a machine learning models. So I want to So as a BI developer, we can easily connect our dashboard to we can easily connect this to our one lake. And if we are working as a data scientist, for a data scientist, we can easily do one or two things in this notebook, this a notebook here, and we can do this our data source. We can add data item here through our lake house here. So if I click on that, if I have a data set on my I can just create the data here. So I can create the data here and try to So I can work with file, I can work with table inside my inside my one lake and my lake house. So I can upload a data set from my I can upload my data I can upload a data set from my uh, computer, and I can also connect this to I can also connect my one lake to a live uh to let me see if I can see a data set from here. So try to check the data set I uploaded. I think the data is not okay. Let me just try to I want to try to get the data here if as NP. Okay, I'm trying to So you can always try to, you can either upload your data to your one lake or lake house here. You can upload it, or you can connect your data directly to uh, you can upload it, or you can connect it to a direct source. And once you do that, there will be an access uh, for your data team to be able to work together without copying from one particular database to the other, or from one data source to the other. So once they upload the data, or they connect to a live database, we can always try to work on the data, and you're going to get it across. So we can also try to, depending on the rule, this is just like if the notebook want to be used, we can quickly come to like creating a notebooks, and to be able to do what we want to do. If we want to perform some analysis, data pre-processing, if you want to, do some like um implement some machine learning model, we can easily do them on our data. So this data is just here, and we can easily do what we want to do. And we can also connect it to a Power BI if we want to build a dashboard, and we can quickly do that here. So what really matters is, and what the problem that one lake is actually solving, that Microsoft is solving through the one lake, is just the access to a centralized or unified source of data for the data team. And this is helping in eradicating of duplicating of data, or copying data from one particular data source to one another, for the data team to be able to work on it. But with the help of one lake and lake house, we can easily upload our data, or connect it to a live database, and they can all work together and have access to the data, and also ensuring the security aspect of the data not linking apart from those in the organization, or those in the team, depending on the role assigned to individual in accessing the data. Because it also has to do with the role, the kind of data team, or the kind of individual that need a certain permission will be given to each individual, either just to view some particular data, or to be able to edit or perform some queries, or perform some analysis on some particular data. Or some data can even be hide for a certain, just like as a data analyst now, if some data need to be hide from a data analyst, or some data need to be hide from a data scientist, because they don't want them to see, or maybe like for the data science team, they don't want them to see particular data in the data source. They can give a certain role-based access that won't allow them to be able to have access to them. But basically, this enable them to have access to the source without copying the data from one side to the other, and they being able to work and ensuring that there is a security around their data source. And their dashboard, the governance report can also be automatically generated, just to monitor what is going on, and for the activities to be tracked. And this can easily be done while opening the one lake catalog to see some of the things here, just like the action period, visuals empty states measured, all, and just to know data owners and data share stacks. So these are all put in place to ensure that the source is being monitored and there is no data leakage, and security is being assured on the data source for the organization. So organization data. So what this to from the okay, so different analysis can be done while having access to the data. Once the data is being accessed, different analysis can be done, and we can, depending on the access given to the role-based access, analysis can be done on the data, and we can uh, it can be for BI access, and it can also be for notebook access. So depending on what they want to use it for, and then once the data is in the one lake, it can easily be used, and it can easily be accessed by the and workspace can also be created most of the time when working in a team, and the team of uh, the team of people that they need to see or have access to some certain data. So a workspace can be created for them where data can be stored in the one lakes and the lake house for them to be able to work together and have access to this particular data. And this is just like a single source of truth, like for them not to be able to look elsewhere to get a certain data or copying from one place to the other. So individual can come there, have access to their own data, have access to the data, and be able to perform their analysis or build ML models or do what they actually want to do on the data. And we have some business impacts on the use of one lake because it's automatically provisioned with every Microsoft Fabric tenant, so no setup is required. So once you have access to Microsoft Fabric tenants. So no setup, no special or any extra setup is required. Then it also supports Medallion architectures, just like I showed the other, like I explained the before now. We have sliver, we have good layers, and these has each they have the functionality, and they have what they do and what they can help businesses to achieve. Then integrate natively with Power BI. It can be used directly by Power BI to build a dashboard, Snapseeds, we have Data Factory, another Fabric service. So no connectors or duplication is needed. So once it's set up and the data is already in the one lake house, this is just like a central source they can all use without duplications or moving it from one side to the other. Then we also have governance and trust. Working with one lake ensure trust, just like I showed the other time. There is a dashboard that can also be used to monitor or check the progressions of how or what is being performed or how the data is being used. And also trust has to do with security. So there is no data leakage because we can always set a role-based access even for our data team. If we don't really want them to see some certain things in the data, we can always hide it from them. And they are embedded at lake level, ensuring secured and compliances data usage across all the workload. So you can easily check the dashboard to see the progressions of the use. So we also have some of the use cases, and is used Microsoft Fabrics is used in different organization sectors in retail, finance, healthcare, manufacturing, any part of sectors. And in this, each sectors use it for different things. We have real-time inventories and sales dashboard powered by one lake. So once the data set is in the one lake, or the data source is in the one lake, it can be live, like connected to a live database, and we can easily have access to real-time inventories and sales by building a dashboard or connecting it to a notebook. We can also, in finance as well, they can unify the reporting across departments. There are different departments working together to make meaningful insight from their data. So this can also be unified. While using the one lake, all the finance team working on this data have access to it, and you can unify it so that there won't be uh, duplicates, or there won't be a mismanage, or just like a part of the team is working on a particular a set of data, and another, so that there won't be a mismanage, or there won't be a misinterpreting of the data. So the data is unified, and they have access to a single source, and all of them can work together by uh, performing their building their dashboard, or connecting it to a notebooks, or doing more than that. So we also have healthcare. Healthcare also centralize patient data with one lake by just connecting their data set or their database to one lake, and this give them a data banks of patients, for them to be able to have access to them and get to use them anytime, or use them in building reports, or in building machine learning model. So we also have in manufacturing, so predicting maintenance, analytics, using Snapseeds and data factories, and also building some pipeline as well, especially when um, real times data are coming, and we don't want to be repeating some single step. While working with the data, we can easily build a pipeline that can do them without trying to repeat the process every time. So we can build a pipeline around it that can always help us uh, to work around those for any new data that is coming in. We can build a pipeline that can solve that. So uh for my social, this is my LinkedIn, and this is my X, and this is all I have today. I don't know, maybe I've used up my up my time, or I still have some time left. I don't know. Hello.
Yeah. So, as this was an important session, so to summarize that, so how do you decide which data belongs to in an one lake versus and remaining in a source system, and standard source system like a database? So how you decide this?
Okay. Well, anytime you want to use the one lake, you you bring it all depends on where the data is, just like the kind of data you want to use. You have to create, there is a one lake, and there is a lake house in the Microsoft Fabrics. And when you want to use some certain data, you can bring it in, and two of them work similarly. They are not really, their capacity is not that different. You can decide to use one lake or lake house because they are together, and their capacity is similar. Like, there is no really difference between the use of the two. There's no really difference between the use of the two.
Okay, so thank you. I think this was an amazing session. I wish you a nice evening, and we see you soon. Bye bye.
The Microsoft ecosystem is evolving faster than ever. Copilot, Power Platform, security, modern work, Azure AI, new features every week, new opportunities every day. But learning is scattered. Events are expensive, limited, and difficult to access. That changes now. Welcome to M365 Con, the world's largest online Microsoft 365 convention. 2 powerful weeks, 1 week of workshops, 1 week of free global talks and keynotes. Build your own learning path with expert-led workshops. From Power Platform to security, from Copilot to Azure AI, you choose what matters to you. Then join over 60 free sessions with most valuable professionals, Microsoft trainers, architects, and innovators from around the world. Meet the community, explore the virtual expo, connect with experts, and be part of a global Microsoft experience. Accessible, global, interactive, and designed for every Microsoft 365 professional. M365 Con, your community, your learning path, your Microsoft 365 future.